Let's give that a try and hope that Lightstream doesn't break today and see what we're actually sending. Oh, hey, that's me. That's me. I'm on the camera now. Nice. Something's working. It's a good day when something's working. Greetings, space nerds. I'm Das. I'll be the studio host today for the broadcast. NASA Spaceflight bringing the United Launch Alliance launch of the AEHF-4, the Advanced Extremely High Frequency Satellite 6, actually, not 4, 6, because the first one I saw was 4, and then I didn't get to 5, but this one is 6 today. So over the next about an hour and a half up until launch, I will be bringing you some commentary here from the NASA Spaceflight studio, which don't be alarmed, it's a spare bedroom at my house, but I have a green screen and a light, and it looks really nice. And then Chris Gebhardt is actually on the way right now to the launch viewing site. Special restrictions for media in place today, only a very, very limited number of media, but NASA Spaceflight's media representative out there is going to be Chris Gebhardt, and he has the live stream camera. So in just a few minutes, we should be hearing from Chris Gebhardt to hear that he is ready to go. So y'all let me know that everything's working correctly. I've got chat over here, and I can read chat in real times. And then I can see myself, which is good sometimes. And I am on Twitch as well right now, so I've got that. Oh, I've got that going on. But I can do a little bit of Q&A as we get started. An awful lot to juggle here. And I am also the studio producer. So when I'm talking, I'm also waiting to hear from Chris Gebhardt to make sure that his remote camera gets spooled up. And once I get confirmation that his remote camera is spooled up, we will bring you that launch video live. Not reusing a stream or anything like that. It's Chris Gebhardt who's going to be there in person. Again, with everything that's going on in the world today, coronavirus and everything like that. First off, I hope everybody's safe. I know that it is affecting people all over the world significantly, so I hope everybody's safe and sheltering in place, following instructions, whatever you're supposed to be doing. Very, very limited media restrictions today. So we don't have a cast of thousands out at Cape Canaveral today covering the launch. It was limited down to a very, very few number of people. I don't know the count, but I know normally where NASA Spaceflight would have a few people out there, right? A couple photographers, live stream host, Chris Gebhardt, reporter, that sort of stuff. We are only having one person out there today. And then we only, if I'm not mistaken, let me get a confirmation on this, but I think we only had one person setting up the remote cameras as well. Somebody back in the studio, confirm that for me if you could. But I believe it was one setup. Yeah, it was one. Okay, thank you, studio. Only one setup there as well. So that is what we are doing. I just heard from Chris Gebhardt that he is getting set up now. So he's reached the viewing area. He's unloading the tripod and the camera and the broadcast unit, the live view solo that we use to bring those remote camera views. And I will get word from him whenever it is ready to go. In the meantime, we can talk a little bit about the mission. I have my cheat sheet up. My cheat sheet, of course, is the NASA Spaceflight article about the Atlas V, which is launching the Space Force's first mission with AEHF-6, right? So let's see if we can pop over this way. Is this, yeah, that's the way we want that to look, right? It's literally just the web browser I'm showing you. So this is Atlas V launching today, and it is an Atlas 551. What does that mean? That is a designator, the way that ULA names their rockets, or I guess designates their rockets, tells you a little bit about how the rocket is put together. So in this picture that we got, we can have a look, and yeah, you can see it's right there. It's close to me, so I can reach it easily. This is an Atlas 551. What does that mean? It means it's a 5-meter fairing up top, so you see that big fairing that sort of comes out the side a little bit and goes up. That's actually encapsulating both the satellite payload and the Centaur upper stage. That fairing actually helps distribute some of the aerodynamic loads down to the rest of the rocket, because that Centaur, that super efficient upper stage, is super lightweight. It's really lightweight. It doesn't have a lot of structure, and for these larger, heavier satellites, the Centaur alone at liftoff, when the forces are great, taking off from the pad, going through max Q, the Centaur wouldn't be able to bear the weight alone. So the fairing here, that big 5-meter fairing, actually helps carry some of the load past the Centaur down to the main body of the booster, that Common Core booster down at the bottom. It's a 551, so it's a 5-meter fairing. It's got 5 SRBs as well. So the white sticks on the side here, and I'll see if we can grab a better picture. The white sticks on the side, those are strap-on solid rocket boosters, right? And so Atlas V is sort of interesting. What they do is they fly all sorts of different payloads with it, and sometimes it doesn't need any SRBs. It can just use the main engine on the bottom. Sometimes it needs one SRB and it power slides off the launch pad, and it's sort of crazy. Sometimes it needs 3 SRBs, 5 SRBs, and they can change the configuration, the number of SRBs that are on the bottom of that thing, based on what the mission is, what the target orbit is, how much energy you need for that orbit, the mass of the payload, all that sort of stuff. So we've got a 551, and the second 5 there, is it the second or first 5? Somebody can correct me on that. All right, 8, and I'm hearing from Chris Gebhardt that he's spooling up as well while I'm running my mouth. Hopefully I'm keeping you informed. So it's a 551, it's a 5-meter fairing, it's 5 SRBs on the side of it, and then the 1 stands for the engine on the upper stage. So it's 1 RL-10 engine on the upper stage. Most of these currently are flying with 1s. At some point we're going to get into some 2 Centaur upper stages, so we'll start to see an N something 2, right, coming up when we start putting 2 Centaurs on the upper stage. But that's what we're doing. Again, if you're just joining us, I'm Das, the studio host for NASA Spaceflight. I'm also on Twitch. I haven't forgot y'all, Seth Kirk and Goalie Bear and everybody over there. I haven't forgot y'all either. I'm managing 2 streams at the same time, and we are waiting for Chris Gebhardt to confirm that his camera live at the Cape. He is actually the only media person from NASA Spaceflight that is out at the launch of the actual press area viewing for this, and he is getting his oh, I actually just saw his remote unit turn on. I'm sort of like, not really Mr. Universe or anything like that, but I can see when he turns his unit on. I see that it's starting to log into the internet and stuff like that here. So it's not spooled up, but it is logged into the internet. And Chris, you can hear me right now, I know. I need you to check. Okay, I need you to hang on for just 1 second for me. We're on the main for remote 2. I need to push a config to your unit. So that's going to take me 2 seconds to do.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And you are now reconfigured. So these live view solos that we use, it's a remote broadcast device that you plug a camera in. They're designed for remote management. So I can actually, Chris G down at Cape Canaveral, I'm sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina. I can log into his unit and I can start and stop the broadcast. I can point it at different destinations. And what I was just doing was I was confirming that his remote unit was pointing to the right destination so we can consume it. All right, Chris, I just heard from Chris that he is spooled up and ready to go. So let's give this a try. Let's try to switch over to Chris G live from Cape Canaveral covering the United Launch Alliance launch of AEHF-6. I hope it works. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we'll see. So I've pushed it. And Chris, you are good to go, buddy.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, where you are looking live at the Atlas V rocket on the launch pad. You can see the big ULA building there just to the left of the Atlas V. That is its vertical integration facility. I managed to get a picture-perfect spot where we could have some good ULA branding in the camera's field of view as we look at the Atlas V. The big white venti vapory stick that you see immediately to the right of that building is the Atlas V and the star of our show today. Right now, the Centaur the upper stage of the Atlas V is being fueled with liquid hydrogen. It was already fueled with liquid oxygen earlier in the Dallas, I can totally hear you, and that's really distracting. And sorry, I needed to say something to my team on the back end there. But anyway, the Atlas Centaur upper stage was already fueled with liquid oxygen earlier today. It is being fueled with liquid hydrogen right now. The Atlas booster, the big gold part of the Atlas that we'll see as it rises off the launch pad, was fueled with RP1 kerosene yesterday, immediately after rollout was completed. and it is now being filled with liquid oxygen. So that will complete the fueling process. The Atlas booster uses ambient RP1 kerosene and cryogenic liquid oxygen, and the Centaur upper stage uses cryogenic oxygen and cryogenic liquid hydrogen for its fuel. And of course, as DOS was overviewing for you right when I got on the audio stream of this on the back end, is that we have 5 solid rocket boosters today as well. Always an impressive sight when the Atlas flies with solid rockets in particular, and it's flying with the most that it possibly can. These are still the Aerojet Rocketdyne solid rocket boosters. ULA will be switching over to Northrop Grumman produced solid rocket boosters for the Atlas V on a mission later this year. I don't believe they've confirmed exactly which mission that is, but they did confirm that it would be this year that they make that switch. Northrop Grumman previously provided the solid rocket boosters for the Delta IV medium range of rockets flown by United Launch Alliance. Northrop Grumman, also the company, through heritage buyouts and things like that, that produced the solid rocket boosters for the space shuttle program, that produced the solid rocket boosters for the SLS program. They're building the mainly solid fueled Omega rocket that will begin flying next year as well. So Northrop Grumman really a true industry leader in terms of solid rocket propulsion and technology. And of course, they have the solid propellant second stage on the Antares vehicle used to launch the Cygnus resupply craft up to the International Space Station. So with all that said, we are about an hour and 6 minutes away from our targeted liftoff time. The opening of the launch window today at 14:57 EDT, or 18:57 UTC. It is a 2-hour-long launch window, so it extends until 16:57 EDT or 20:57 UTC. We hope it goes at the opening of the window. Right before I jumped on air, I had been listening to the countdown net, and there were no open anomaly investigations or anything of the kind at that point, and fueling had gone absolutely perfectly. So right now it does appear that all is tracking toward a liftoff at the opening of our launch window today. And I just heard over the comnet that the liquid oxygen load complete onto the Centaur. It's in topping, or stable replenish as they refer to it as, and the liquid hydrogen fill is currently at 75%, and the Atlas booster is currently 80% full with its liquid oxygen load at this point. So fueling going very, very well. So now that we've got all that out of the way, let me pause and say what I should have at the beginning when I jumped on. Hello and greetings. Welcome to the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. I'm Chris Gebhardt. I'm the Assistant Managing Editor of NASASpaceflight. Thanks so much to DOS, our studio host, for bridging that gap between when we went on air and when I was still convoying into the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. It's super thanks, and it's super helpful, DOS, to have you on the back end. And a big shout out to our behind the scenes producer, Michael Baylor, who is here with us as well. Michael produces almost all of our streams for us. We couldn't do it without him. Huge thank you to Michael as well. So let's talk a little bit about the big elephant in the room first, which is clearly the coronavirus outbreak and what is currently going on here. The Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center, which share land here, have different ways that they refer to their response levels for this particular outbreak. But basically, both of the centers are at the same level of preparedness, which means maximum telework for all non-essential personnel, only mission-critical personnel allowed on base. Right now, this is a national security launch, this particular mission, with the Advanced Extremely High Frequency 6 satellite for the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. military. So it is, even if the bases were to be on even more of a lockdown than they already are, this mission would be allowed to proceed, but we're not at the point yet from both centers of having to stop missions or anything like that, or starting to cut missions. Oops, sorry, I bumped the camera there. Depending on depending on what those missions are, whether they're national security or government missions or civilian missions or commercial missions. So both bases are currently on mandatory telework, restricted to essential personnel only. The way they have accommodated media for this particular mission, yesterday all the media did not get out of their individual cars. They caravanned into the launch pad to set their remotes in their own cars. They did not go near one another while they were setting remotes. They maintained that social distancing that the CDC is telling us to do, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is telling us to do here in the United States. Today was a huge change, though. They significantly reduced the number of media outlets who were allowed on and limited media outlets more or less to one person per organization, with a couple of exceptions for the broadcast news media who need an on-air reporter and a camera operator as well. And they're forcing us all to stay at least 20 feet apart from one another, but very, very reduced numbers here. They have also asked us to create a pool of video and photography assets for those of our colleagues who are not able to be on base here. Jim Williams did a great job of organizing all of this. Jim is the head public affairs officer for Patrick Air Force Base and the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Shout out to Jim. He's in his goatee work from home phase right now, but he's done a great job of still allowing us to have access out here and share assets with those of our colleagues who couldn't make it out. So that's how Cape Canaveral Air Force Station is handling this outbreak and keeping us safe, but also keeping us with an ability to bring this to you and broadcast this to you. So we want to make sure to really thank Jim for that as well. In my earpiece here, hearing from the launch team at United Launch Alliance that fueling of the Centaur and the Atlas continue to go perfectly with no anomalies currently being worked. If you have any questions for us, please throw them up into the chat of this YouTube channel, and my producers behind the scenes will go ahead and get those over to me. We're taking any and all questions about United Launch Alliance, the Atlas, the Delta, the upcoming Vulcan vehicle from United Launch Alliance, the payload, this particular configuration of the Atlas, any questions you have about space in general. We're answering all of them. As we do on all of our streams, we love questions about this particular mission, but we're happy to answer any of your questions as well. Also in chat, let us know where from around the world you are watching from. We all need a little hope and a little something to take our mind off of everything that's happening in the world right now. And we hope that for the next hour, United Launch Alliance and the Atlas V will give us that much needed happy distraction. But let us know from around the world where you are watching from. And again, if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them to us. In terms of fueling, liquid oxygen has just reached its topping level. So it is done with fast fill, and they are now in the process of just, kind of like when you pump gas into your car where the main nozzle cuts off and then you kind of pump some more in there just to top the tank off. That's kind of what they're doing now with the Centaur. The Atlas liquid oxygen load is currently over 90% and also headed toward topping and stable replenish as well. Again, everything going very, very well. You can see some of the vapors coming off of the liquid oxygen vapors coming off of the Atlas there too in the distance as it vents on its launch pad about 4 miles away from where I'm standing right now. So we do have some questions. Excellent, excellent. So Michael01 wants to know, okay, I'm going to skip the first two questions and come back to them just so we can start off our Q&A about an Atlas and United Launch Alliance launch with an Atlas question and not a SpaceX question. I love all of you for that, but we will answer them. But let's start off with a question about this Atlas. So will the upper stage deploy a nozzle extension today? Pascal Schubert wants to know. He's watching from Germany. Welcome from Germany. No, the RL-10 on the Atlas is not like the upper stage on the Delta, where there's a nozzle extension that comes down after after the main core booster stage separates. The Atlas's RL-10 engines are pretty stable and pretty fixed, so so we won't have a nozzle extension on the Atlas today, or on the Centaur today rather. What you will see that's very cool from the onboard rocket cams is that when the Atlas, after booster separation, when the Atlas booster falls away and the Centaur engine is exposed, you will see a lot of gimbaling and everything of that RL-10 engine as it corrects for the dispersions into its orientation that are induced into the stack at Atlas booster separation, and as it goes into its closed loop guidance, where it's flying itself based on its computer programming, knowing where it has to get to, and what the various pitches and rolls of the Centaur upper stage need to be to get the AEHF-6 satellite into its initial orbit. So we will see a lot of that. The next question we're going to take too is, what does 551 mean after the Atlas V designation? And we've got a great graphic that we're going to throw up onto the screen for you that's mission specific to this one actually, but shows you exactly what we mean. So the Atlas V is the base name of the rocket, right? But it has different configurations to it. And it's those numbers that follow the Roman numeral 5 that dictate what configuration of the Atlas is flying a particular mission. So for this one, it is the Atlas V 551 variant. The first 5 means it's flying with a 5-meter diameter payload fairing. The second 5 indicates that there are 5 solid rocket motors attached to the Atlas. And the 1 indicates the single engine Centaur upper stage. So for kind of a historical perspective with the Atlas V, so that first number is either a 4 or a 1, because the Atlas only has a 4-meter payload fairing or a 5-meter payload fairing. So that Atlas V and then that first number that follows the Roman numeral 5 is always either going to be a 5 or a 4. The middle number can either be 0 to 5, because the Atlas can fly with 0 solid rockets, it can fly with 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 solid rockets as well. The thrust vector control system of the Russian-made RD-180 engine on the Atlas V booster has an incredible range to it, and that's what allows the Atlas to really fly with asymmetrical thrusts of 1, 3, or 5 solid rocket boosters as it's doing today. That last number can either be a 1 or a 2, because the Centaur can only fly with either a single engine or a dual engine configuration to it. To date, the Atlas V has only flown once with a dual engine Centaur upper stage, and that was for the Starliner mission back in December of 2019. Dual engine Centaurs will be used on all of the upcoming Starliner crew missions to the International Space Station, as well as on the Dream Chaser spacecraft that will begin flying as part of NASA's commercial crew program, not commercial cargo program, as well, as we move forward here. But that's what that means. So I don't forget some of the questions that we had earlier. Michael 01 asked, and this was my first question, but I wanted to take a ULA Atlas question first. But Michael wanted to know, what is SpaceX doing on pad 39A? I see some tents around it. Yeah, so first thing, 39A is not in camera view here. But in general, yes, there are a lot of construction tents around LC-39A at the Kennedy Space Center right now, because SpaceX that is an active construction zone for SpaceX as they construct the Starship launch and landing facilities at that location as well. So those are all the tents that you see around the SpaceX pad right now. And Joseph Bondi wants to know, whatever happened to Sea Launch? Well, while Sea Launch went defunct by themselves, their platform was actually just transferred over to Russia, because Russia will begin using that Sea Launch platform for some of their orbital launch campaigns as well. So that is what happened to Sea Launch and their platform. But definitely keep your questions coming, guys. We are still over 50 minutes, about 55 minutes to go before the opening of our 2-hour launch window. Again, everything right now continuing to track toward an on-time liftoff of 1457 EDT, 1857 UTC. So if you've got questions, keep throwing them up. We're here to answer any and all of your questions. ULA specifically is what we'd love, but we'll answer questions about any space program, any space company around the world that you've got. So Football Ian, so first question I know my boss is going to ask. So Football Ian, do you mean actual football or American football? Because I know my boss is going to ask about that. And there's definitely a right answer when you ask the Yorkshireman what football means. But Ian Football wants to know why is the rocket so close to the building? So that is a great question, and it's totally the perspective of where I'm standing on Cape Canaveral and how we're looking at it. So the vertical integration facility is actually quite a distance from the launch pad. They just look like they're so close to one another in this particular view, but they're actually separated by thousands of feet from one another. And Michael, actually, if we've got a good sort of aerial view or a good wide angle shot of Slick 41 to show people what I mean, the vertical integration facility is actually outside of the pad perimeter of pad 41, so the Atlas is actually integrated there and then taken out to the launch pad. And the horizontal, the vertical integration facility that you see here is actually farther away from the launch pad than SpaceX's horizontal integration facilities at pad 40 and pad 39A are from those launch pads. So it's actually quite a distance from the pad itself. It's just a camera angle here. In fact, from our camera angle, if you look at the top of that large white building that has ULA painted on top of it, you see two little white sticks sticking out the top of it. Those sticks are not actually on the vertical integration facility. They are the two other lightning protection towers, 1,000 or more feet away from that tower, away from that building. So that kind of should help give you a little perspective of like how far away that building actually is from the pad, hopefully. And hopefully we were able to throw up a graphic there. Oh, we're going to get one in 1 second so you guys can see exactly how far away it is. But that's a great question. You know, a lot of times when you're looking at things out here, when you're on the ground at Cape Canaveral, I'm on the ITL Causeway right now, things look a lot closer than they are because your line of sight can just align you perfectly where they look like they're right on top of each other when in fact they are not. So hopefully that does answer your question, Ian. As we wait to get okay, perfect. And that's the overview of the pad that you're now looking at, so you can see where that vertical integration facility is in relation to the actual launch mount and launch towers and the lightning protection systems at pad 41, which is what we're looking at now with the Atlas V, which is now fully fueled and raring to go to take AEHF-6, the Advanced Extremely High Frequency 6 satellite, up into orbit. So another question, so another question that we have coming up here. So overall, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm doing this off the top of my head, I believe this is the 82nd flight of the Atlas V rocket. 83rd, the 83rd flight of the Atlas V rocket today. It still stands as of right now as the most flown, currently operational U.S. launcher, although SpaceX is right behind them at 82 missions, to their credit, right now on the Falcon 9. And it is the United States' so it's not only the lead by at least one mission in terms of the most flown U.S. rocket currently in operation, but it is the most reliable U.S. rocket currently in operation right now, with a 100% success record across its 82 previous missions, this one being its 83rd. So Matthew Pryor, I hope that answers your question. Your question was, what is the number of the vehicle? It's the 83rd flight of the Atlas, and it is Atlas Vehicle 86 that is flying this particular mission today. So Atlas Vehicle 86 flying the 83rd Atlas V mission for today. So I hope that answers your question. If that's not what you meant, let us know. Throw that question back up into chat with a little bit more of an explanation as to what you meant if that wasn't what you were asking, and we'll go ahead and get your question answered. T65B X-Wing Fighter, great name, wants to know, why is the Atlas SRB jettison staggered by a second and a half? Great question. So the solid rocket boosters on the Atlas are not like these huge solid rocket boosters from the shuttle era that we're used to, right? That flank the entire side of the stack so they can separate at the exact same time and not bounce into anything or into each other. But on the Atlas V, they actually can, because these suckers only burn for 90 seconds. Now, 5 of them burning for 90 seconds throws the Atlas really high up and really far down range very quickly. But if you were to separate all 5 of them at the exact same time, they might collide with one another. So they actually stagger the separation sequence, 3 and then 2. 3 go together, 2 go together, and they stagger them by a second and a half so that they don't interfere with one another or impact one another as they're separating away from the Atlas. It's a great question. And it's really something to behold as you watch the boosters pop off in their staggered formation from one another. It's really, really cool to watch that happen. Nick Apollo 11 wants to know, what launch pad is this and where is the camera set up? Yes, so this is launch pad 41 at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. It is the northernmost launch pad on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station side of the spaceport complex here. But a cool little thing about it is it's technically on the Kennedy Space Center side of the boundary transition between the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center. However, Cape Canaveral Air Force Station leases it, so if for launches, it technically goes into the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station side of the launch register than the Kennedy Space Center, even though Kennedy technically owns the land that it's on. It's a nice little weird transition and boundary that occurs between the two. So yeah, it's technically a Kennedy Space Center owned Cape Canaveral Air Force Station leased part of the spaceport complex here on the Cape. But great question there. And as for the camera, I am set up about 4 miles away from the pad on the ITL causeway. The launch pad that ITL is closest to is the Delta 4 pad, pad 37B, which unfortunately I am not allowed to swing the camera to show you, but is very, very, very close to where I am standing right now. In fact, it's so close to where we're standing that the ITL causeway is 99% of the time closed for Delta 4 heavy missions because it's inside the blast danger zone for that particular rocket and that pad. So yeah, it's really close. It's really close. Although I would love to see a Delta 4 go from this distance. They won't let me, but I'd love to see it. You know, health and safety reasons and preservation of life and all that. It's important, which is actually why we have these blast danger areas. And for each launch, each vehicle, it's calculated based on day of launch conditions and winds and things like that. So there have actually been times when we've been told in advance that we're coming to the ITL causeway, and then on the day of, the particular wind direction would actually blow all of that toxic debris toward us and potentially land on us if we were here, so they closed the ITL causeway. So it's kind of an ever-moving target of where media might be able to watch particular rockets launch from because of the area that we have to keep out of. And that that minimum distance you can safely get to a rocket that we impose here in the United States. But it's really cool. Perfect. And that map that you're looking at right now is exactly like the map of where I am in relation to the launch pad for today's mission, to give you an idea of where I am on base here. So Matthew Thompson has a great question here. Do they use the dual engine Centaur on crew missions for redundancy? The answer is yes, but so yes, it is primarily used for redundancy on the crew missions. If you lose an engine, you still have one, so it can enable and keep your ability to abort to particular locations that you really want to get to in launch abort scenarios near recovery forces. But also, the main reason that they use the dual-engine Centaur upper stage on the Atlas V for the Starliner crew missions is because they actually really need it. The Atlas V booster and the solid rockets fly a much shallower trajectory than normal Atlas V uncrewed missions do, and it sacrifices a lot of performance on the booster with that shallower trajectory, and the booster has to throttle back a lot more than it normally does. The Atlas V normally throttles back to maintain a 4 to 5 G-force load limit on satellites. It depends on the satellite and the mission. But for crew missions of the Starliner, it has to throttle back to maintain 3G acceleration force limits. And that is a huge performance hit to the Atlas. So you actually end up needing the dual-engine Centaur upper stage to barely get Starliner into a suborbital drop-off trajectory, with Starliner then doing a 30-second burn after it reaches the top, the apex of its suborbital trajectory. Starliner actually fires its own engines to complete that orbit insertion. So we really actually need both of those engines on the Centaur upper stage for Starliner, but the two engines do provide redundancy for abort scenarios, because there might be cases where you lose an engine. If you were to lose one of the RL-10 engines on the Centaur upper stage for a Starliner launch, where you wouldn't have enough performance left to get to orbit, but you would have enough performance from that remaining engine to get you to a point where when you popped Starliner off in its abort, it would land near recovery forces. So it does provide a nice redundancy there to the abort recovery operations. And of course, if you were to lose one RL-10 engine very late into the flight where the other one could compensate and recover and still get you to orbit, it provides you that redundancy to get to orbit as well. But it's a great question. That's a complicated yes answer to the question that you actually asked. Babinski, Utah. Hey, how's it going out there? Are there any two-engine Centaur launches booked for satellites or interplanetary probes, or is it just Starliner and Dreamchaser? It is just Starliner and Dreamchaser that have the dual-engine Centaur configuration orders right now for the Atlas V. There are no planetary or satellite missions that require them as of that point. And I should stop and actually say that the dual-engine Centaurs were ordered for Dreamchaser, but Dreamchaser has actually switched over completely to Vulcan. So Dreamchaser won't be launching on Atlas, it'll be launching on Vulcan, but before it made that switch, and thanks Michael for correcting me on that, because yes, before Dreamchaser made the launch vehicle switch, it was going to have a dual-engine Centaur upper stage for the Atlas. So actually right now on Atlas, it's only the dual-engine Centaur upper stage for Starliner missions at this point. Michael is the dual-engine Centaur for... yeah. But what is intriguing about this, right, and as they make the switch over to Vulcan, the Vulcan Centaur configuration will fly with that dual-engine Centaur configuration as its normal configuration. So whereas the Atlas's normal configuration is a single-engine Centaur upper stage, the Vulcan rocket will have the dual-engine Centaur upper stage as well. So great question up there. And Spacing Out, we actually just answered your question, I see. Will Vulcan always use a two-engine Centaur or switch between one or two? Right now, always use a dual for the Vulcan rocket. So, yep, that is one of the main differences between the two in terms of the upper stages that they use. There's a whole lot of differences on the first stage of between the Atlas and the Vulcan, but the main difference in the Centaur upper stage is the number of engines each will use. So right now we are 40 minutes away from the opening of our launch window. It is 14:17 local here at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and everything's still tracking to a launch at the opening of the launch window at 14:57 EDT or 18:57 UTC. I admit an hour and a half ago when I was driving in, I was really worried about the cloud cover here because we had really thick clouds overhanging the launch complex, but they have cleared and we're now almost under completely clear skies right now. So that is definitely trending in the correct direction, and hopefully that maintains over the next 40 minutes as Atlas gets off the pad. So Tucker Welker wants to know, how much does this Atlas cost? Okay, so what I'm going to ask Michael Baylor to do in the background is to go on Rocket Builder and build the 551 configuration. Okay, so this particular one, the contract for AEHF-6, which was the previous launch to this one, but an identical satellite, was billed at $138 million. For an Atlas 551. Now, what's important about that is the base public figure that is available via United Launch Alliance's Rocket Builder website, where you can go in and see how much an Atlas mission would cost you. But this is a US military launch, which means there's a whole bunch of extra stuff that the military asks ULA for, which moves that price up. So 138 million is the absolute base of what an Atlas 551 in this exact configuration would cost a customer if they didn't want added things to it. But the military and the US government always adds things to their contracts, which ups the price. That also doesn't include the money that the US military gives specifically to United Launch Alliance to maintain their pad infrastructure for these launches, which is a heritage throwback to the days when United Launch Alliance was the only company capable of launching or certified to launch US military payloads. So the military paid them a lot of money to maintain the ability to do so. Some of those payments are going away as SpaceX has come onto the scene and said, why would you pay us to maintain this particular architecture instead of bidding for what the missions would actually cost? So some of that is going away. But this particular mission with the Advanced Extremely High Frequency 6 satellites are part of that old school heritage block buy contracts for military launches that the US government did with United Launch Alliance, which is one of the reasons why United Launch Alliance has launched all 6 of the AEHF satellites, and they are a constellation of 6. So this is the 6th and final one planned for this particular flight. So yes, so hopefully that answered your question about what the price point is for an Atlas 551 in general. Exactly how much the US government paid for this particular mission, we don't have the exact figure to hand to you because that hasn't been released. And it's a little tricky to try to figure out. So Gaming with Radit wants to know, can the Vulcan rocket launch this payload if the Atlas V is retired? Yes, Vulcan is more than capable of launching an Advanced Extremely High Frequency series satellite. In fact, all of the missions that Atlases and that the Atlas V's and the Delta IVs launch will combine together into the Vulcan rocket. Vulcan is meant as the successor to both the Atlas V and the Delta IV rockets. The main difference here is that Vulcan will start flying while the Atlas V and Delta IVs are flying out their manifests. So there will be quite a few years of overlap between Vulcan and and the Delta IV, and several years of overlap between the Atlas V and Vulcan. Now, Vulcan will launch from this exact same launch pad that you're looking at right now. In fact, they are already constructing the mobile launcher for the Vulcan rocket, and they will be able to simply swap out Vulcan to Atlas by switching which mobile launcher they stack the missions on. So there'll be a dedicated Atlas V mobile launcher that's on the pad right now with this Atlas, and there's a dedicated Vulcan mobile launcher, and they just swap those out, and that's how they'll do it. The pad infrastructure can handle both. They're still working on a lot of pad upgrades and infrastructure enhancements at pad 41 to be able to handle the Vulcan, mainly because the Vulcan will use methane and oxygen for its first stage booster, using the BE4 engine from Blue Origin. but it will use methane and oxygen for its first stage, whereas the Atlas V uses RP1 kerosene and oxygen. So that's one of the main big differences between the two stages there. Luke DeSormo wants to know, can you explain the different mission types that are currently flown? Example, what is Dream Chaser? Sorry, total noob. No, that's exactly the type of question we're looking for here. We love these types of questions because they're really important. So today is launching a satellite, right? This is a satellite that will go up into, it's a geostationary transfer orbit mission, meaning that the satellite's eventual place in orbit will be geostationary, meaning that it will consistently stay above the exact same point on Earth. So basically, its orbital speed is the exact same speed with which the Earth rotates. So it stays over constantly the same place over the Earth at all times. The Dream Chaser that I was referring to earlier, that's a space plane. It's basically a mini space shuttle that will be tasked with at least 6 cargo resupply runs up to the International Space Station. Hang on one second for me. So there is an off-scale high temperature indication on these Centaur upper stages RL-10 engine. They have convened the Anomaly team to go off and look at that. So Luke, I'm going to pause answering your question real quick and come back to it so I can explain what they just said over the commnet about the engine temperature. So there was a call out over the net that they had an off-scale high temperature indication in the RL-10 engine, which is the single engine that powers the Centaur upper stage. They convened the Anomaly team on the Anomaly net to go off and talk about this. For those of you who are not familiar with Atlas launch countdowns and haven't heard their countdown procedures, this is a very normal thing that United Launch Alliance does. It does not indicate by itself that this is a launch-threatening issue. Anything that pops up that is outside of the expected range of operations for the various systems are classified as an anomaly, and the Anomaly team goes off to look at exactly what it is, what they're actually seeing. Is it a real issue? Is it a sensor issue? Is it a sensor calibration issue? Is it something they can accept as an acceptable issue and launch anyway, or is it something that they actually need to stop for? This is what they go off and discuss on the Anomaly net. They then come back and have the out briefing from the Anomaly team where they will brief the launch director and the launch teams on what the Anomaly team believes should be the best course of forward action. So just because there's a sensor that has indicated something not correct with where it should be right now, and that they have convened the Anomaly team to go look at it, does not mean it's a launch stopping issue. It just means that something came up that's not within the normal parameters. They're going to go off and talk about it. They'll come back to us and talk about what the proposals are. So, Luke, back to your question about Dream Chaser. So Dream Chaser is basically a space plane. It's a mini space shuttle that will be tasked with at least 6 cargo resupply runs up to the International Space Station as part of the second round of commercial resupply services that NASA signed with Sierra Nevada, which builds the Dream Chaser spacecraft, with SpaceX, and with Northrop Grumman. So right now we only have SpaceX and Northrop Grumman conducting US resupplies to the International Space Station. They will be joined by Dream Chaser here in the next year or so, flying missions itself. Dream Chaser will fly on a Vulcan rocket. It will launch inside of a payload fairing, and will be exposed to space after the payload fairing pops off during launch. Dream Chaser, like the Crew Dragon capsules and Cargo Dragon capsules, will be able to return a significant amount of hardware and science from the International Space Station. It will land like the Space Shuttle did at the shuttle landing facility here, or out in California. And it will be reused for various missions, just like the Cargo Dragons and the Crew Dragon capsules are reused currently for cargo resupply services to the station. So that's the 2 different missions. And then Starliner, I know you didn't ask, but Starliner is the crew launch vehicle for Boeing as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. So it launches right now solely on an Atlas V rocket, and that is the only rocket it's currently certified to fly on, even though Starliner was in ways meant to be launch vehicle agnostic, so it could switch launch vehicles if needed. Of course, if it switches to Vulcan, Vulcan will have to be certified as a human-rated rocket after it starts flying its missions, and we'll have to go through all the procedures that the Atlas V and the Falcon 9 had to go through in order to be certified to carry humans as well. So I hope that answered your question. If you've got other questions like that, please ask. And everyone listening, okay, hang on one second. It looks like they're going to do their weather briefing here, but so I'm just standing by them listening. So for everyone listening, Luke's question, and even though he said sorry, total noob, those are the questions we want. Those are the questions, you know, don't feel ashamed or worried to ask those types of questions. This is what we're here for, to answer any and all of your questions. Even if you think it's already been asked, even if you're nervous to ask it, because that was a great question from Luke there. I'm really happy that we can answer it. Doug Dory, thanks so much for the super chat, man. I really appreciate it. You know, we love bringing you these things during this particular viral outbreak and pandemic. We will continue to be here and provide you all with live streams and coverage of these missions as long as it is safe to do so. So we really appreciate your support in this. We love doing this regardless. I hope in a way it's a nice distraction. It's a pleasant interlude to your day to be able to watch a rocket launch from Florida. I know it's always an incredible experience when you can see with your own two eyes and feel the power of a rocket taking something off planet Earth, something that will never return to Earth. It's amazing. It's amazing to experience that, and I hope that these live streams allow all of you who can't travel to the launch site or who haven't had the opportunity to do so yet to kind of make it feel like you're here with me watching it. I try to be as expressive as possible during the launches because that's me. I always seem to yell and hoop and holler when these things launch, and I hope you guys do too at home. So thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Let's actually go ahead and talk a little bit about the launch process and oh, hang on, they're going to do the outbrief on the RL-10 anomaly. Hang on. I'll relay the important parts to you, but hang on, there might be silent air for a second. Instrumentation issue only. Recommendation is to proceed. So exactly what I had said there earlier. Just because there's an anomaly that they go off to talk about doesn't mean it's launch ending. The exact quote was, we have quote significant evidence that this is a sensor issue only, and that we have good temperatures on the RL-10. Recommendation is to proceed, end quote, is what they said over the net. So we are still on track for a launch in about 26 minutes from now at the opening of our launch window at 14:57 EDT, which is 18:57 UTC. So let's talk a little bit, since we've cleared that anomaly and we're heading for the top of our window now, let's take a look at our launch timeline for today, because it is quite long. So we will certainly not be here with you for the entirety of it. But I believe right now you're looking at the you're looking at the event timeline. So you can see here that it actually, the way the Atlas actually works, and it's really interesting. So the RD-180, the Russian-made RD-180 engine on the base of the Atlas V is commanded to ignite at T-minus 2.7 seconds. It takes the RL-10 engine about 1.1 seconds past the T0 mark in the countdown to complete all of its health checkouts and be ramped up to full thrust. So the solid rocket boosters aren't actually lit until 1.1 seconds after T0, because the rocket is still clamped to the launch pad as the RD-180 engine builds up to full thrust. So liftoff doesn't occur at T0. Liftoff actually occurs 1.1 second after T0 when the solid rockets are lit. Because once you light all 5 solid rockets, you are going. You are going whether you want to or not. That's a really good phrase and saying that's used in solid rocket flight technology, is that once you light those solids, you're going. Whether you want to or not, you're leaving the pad. And then you can actually see, as we work our way down, one thing about SRB jettison 1 minute 46 seconds after liftoff is that that's actually about 10 seconds after the solid rocket motors burn out. So the solid rocket motors burn out, and Atlas keeps carrying them for another 10 seconds or so before the jettison sequence is commanded. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, they want to make sure that the thrust of those, that all the propellant, all those residual propellants inside the solid rockets have burned out. Thank you, Jim. have completely burned out, because you don't want any thrust from those. You don't want the boosters to still be thrusting when you jettison them, because you don't want them to potentially recontact each other or the Atlas or anything like that. It's very different than the shuttle and SLS, in that when the shuttle solid rockets were jettisoned, we still wanted them producing a little bit of thrust, so that when they separated and those booster separation motors fired to peel them away from the external tank, the residual thrust left in them actually carried them farther away from the shuttle stack. Same thing that's going to happen with the SLS rocket. But on Atlas, we don't want that. We want them totally null and void of any propellant as ULA pops them off the side of the Atlas. So that's why Atlas actually holds on to them for a little bit before popping them off. And then you can see it follows a pretty standard launch profile from there. The booster, the Atlas RD-180 will shut down just under 4.5 minutes into launch. We'll then have Atlas Centaur stage separation and Centaur engine ignition 4 minutes 42 seconds into flight. It's a long flight from there till the first main engine cutoff of the Atlas 11 minutes 46 seconds after liftoff. And that's probably when we're going to have to cut the broadcast here from ITL, and I will throw it back to Das and Michael, because we're going to have to leave base at that point, because as you can see, it's quite a long ways to spacecraft separation, 5 hours, 40 minutes, and 56 seconds after liftoff. And I ain't staying in the sun on the ITL causeway that long. Plus they'll kick me out. But you can really see how long of a mission profile this is, with the official end of the mission over 6.5 hours after liftoff here today. So that's a good rundown of what we can expect to see during the Atlas's mission and launch sequence today. Queequill Happy, I hope I said your name wrong. Thanks so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. They said, love the videos, you rock. Thank you so much for keeping us informed and entertained. Keep it up. Greetings from Spain. Hope you're keeping safe over there in Spain as well. So let's keep taking some of your questions as we march down here in the final 20 minutes before the opening of our launch window. Danielle Thomas says that she has a 4th grader there. How long did it take to build the Atlas V? That is a great question. So it takes a couple of years to build an Atlas from when they first start bending metal for it and the Centaur upper stage to the rocket configuration that you see sitting here on the pad waiting to go. So it does take about a couple of years lead time to build an Atlas V. And of course in this one they not only had to worry about the Atlas booster and the Centaur, as well as acquiring the RD-180 engine for the Atlas and the RL-10 engine for the Centaur upper stage. They also had to build the payload fairings. They had to contract with Aerojet Rocketdyne to build and cast the 5 solid rocket motors, since those are not Since those are not recovered for reuse, they have to be built from scratch each mission. So overall, a couple of years to build everything that you now see on the launch pad right now. And now that doesn't factor in delays to when this mission was originally supposed to launch and how it's been, and the delays that creep up in any schedule, right, as either payloads fall a little bit behind or the manifest and launches sort of spread out a little bit more from how they're originally planned. But about a couple years is how long it takes to build an Atlas. Yeah, and that's a great question there. And also, hopefully, hey, the NSF live stream, that can fulfill some science questions for all the students studying at home. So if you've got students at home and you're watching this and they've got questions, send them along to us, and we'd love to answer them and get that engagement going as well. It doesn't get more science-y than launching a rocket and a payload into space. So right now we are now at T-minus 4 minutes and holding. This is our planned built-in hold that allows teams to make sure they've triple checked everything, make sure that all the work is actually complete before beginning the final 4-minute terminal count sequence and heading to the liftoff of the Atlas V. So we are in that planned built-in hold now. The next major event we will stand by for is the go, no go for launch poll, which will come up about 7 minutes prior to liftoff. So at about 14:50 or about 12 minutes from now is when we can expect that. John wants to know how many launch pads are at Cape Canaveral. Oh boy, what a question that is. So, well, they're in numerical sequence, and you're looking at 41, and 41's the highest number on the Cape side for launch pads. But in terms of active number of launch pads, there are only 4 active launch pads right now on the Cape Canaveral Air Force side of the station. There's Slick 41, Space Launch Complex 41, which you are looking at right now, where the Atlas V launches from, and future home of the Vulcan as well. You have Slick 40 just to the south of it, which is where SpaceX launches their Falcon 9 rockets from. To the south of that, you have Launch Pad 37B, where the Delta IV Heavy rocket launches from right now, and you have another launch pad further down where the Minotaur rockets can launch from as well. This is where last year, in July of last year, where the Orion Ascent Abort, that funky little first stage rocket from Northrop Grumman, that's where that one launched from on the Cape side. So only 4 active ones right now. Blue Origin is building theirs, which would be the 5th. There are, there's SpaceX's landing pads that they have here, which are technically launch pads, but have just been reconfigured to not launch anything anymore, but land things. But in terms of active number of launch pads that rockets actually go from, there are only 4 on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station side and 2 on the Kennedy Space Center side of things. Great question there. Okay, so we have a good question here from Jake Farrow, and Michael, I'm going to need your help on this behind the scenes. What is the maximum payload capacity of an Atlas V 551 rocket configuration? We will get 8,900 kilograms is the maximum payload that the Atlas V 551 can take to geostationary transfer orbit, which is the orbit it is going to today. So that is the answer to that. 8,900 kilograms is your max payload for the Atlas 551 configuration. Raphael Grabansky, I hope I said your last name right. I'm so sorry if I didn't. How long does ULA plan to manufacture Atlas V rockets? That's a great question. ULA has really only said that the Atlas V rocket will eventually be succeeded by the Vulcan rocket, but they have set no hard, fast, no more Atlas Vs after this date. They haven't set anything like that for this rocket. So that's kind of why I said a bit earlier in the broadcast that Vulcan and Atlas will be sharing a pad for quite some time, as their service lifetimes overlap here. What is known is the Delta IV Heavy rockets. There's one I'm looking at right now on pad 37B here. Those will launch out through 2024, and right now that's it. They do not plan to build any more. Beyond that, they are completely phasing out the Delta IV rocket family in favor of Vulcan. So the Delta IVs have a pretty firm 2024 is the last mission for that, and the only reason they might go beyond 2024 is if there are launch slips to the missions they already have purchased and procured for the Delta line of vehicles. But of note, a part of the Delta IV will keep flying after the Delta IV is actually retired, and that is its second stage. The Delta Cryogenic second stage is actually the interim cryogenic propulsion stage on NASA's Space Launch System rocket, which will fly with one of those for at least its first 4 missions, if not longer. So a part of the Delta will still be produced and continue to fly on the SLS rocket, but the Delta itself will be retired in 2024 or 2025 if there's launch slips or payload slips for those in particular. And we are 14 minutes away from launch, so about 7 minutes away from our go, no, go poll at this point. So I'm going to keep taking your questions here. Marcel wants to know, will there be coverage beyond the launch, like deploying the payload in orbit? No, so United Launch Alliance will not continue broadcasting. So the only coverage we will get is ULA or the Air Force tweeting successful separation of the payload. At least that's what we understand right now. And of course, Tori Bruno tweeting out the 3-digit number indicating a successful mission of the Atlas V has been accomplished. And if we see that number today, we certainly hope we see that number today, it will be 138 in a row successful launches for United Launch Alliance. 138 out of 138 it will be today if this mission is successful, which of course we hope it is. Newbie wants to know, at the launch pads, I always see those 4 vertical poles. What purpose do they serve? Excellent question. So they are talking about the 4 gray towers with big white rods on top of them that you always see. You can see 2 of them very clearly to the right of the rocket, and you can see the other 2 popping out from the top of the ULA building. Those are the lightning protection towers. Every single launch pad here at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and Kennedy Space Center has lightning protection towers because Florida is the lightning capital of the United States. And in our afternoon summertime period, we routinely get severe torrential thunderstorms with cloud-to-ground lightning strikes. And you don't want lightning hitting any of your pad infrastructure, especially a rocket that might be fueled on the launch pad, but you don't want it hitting anything. So these lightning towers are around all of our launch pads here, so that if a thunderstorm rolls overhead, which it does on an almost daily basis for 6 months out of the year, here at the Cape, if there is a cloud-to-ground lightning strike, it hits the top of those lightning towers, and then all of the electrical energy is channeled through the canatary, I can never say these, the wires, I can never say that word. Sorry, you've reached the one word I can't say. But all the wires along those lightning towers are strung in particular ways and then anchored down into the ground and grounded there so that all of the electrical energy of a lightning strike is channeled safely away from the rocket, away from the ground infrastructure at the pad, and discharged safely into the ground to protect the systems and the pad equipment. So that is what you see, very, very necessary piece of equipment here in Florida. But also why you don't see them at other launch ranges around the world, because not every range has lightning problems like we do here in Florida to contend with. DOS battery, yeah, battery check is totally good. 217 minutes of battery life remaining, so we're good right now. Datamax, thank you, and Jared and Henning, thank you so much for the for the super chats. Again, really appreciate it. We love bringing this to you. I love bringing this to you. I hope it makes you all feel like you're here in some way. But I really appreciate the super chats. Greatly appreciated. Greetings, Chris G. Great job, Chris. This guy again! Exclamation point with a grin face. Love it. Okay, Space Buff wants to know, why does Delta rockets catch fire during launch? Yes, this is an awesome question. So some of you are probably going, whoa, what do you mean? The Delta rocket catches fire when it lifts off? Yes, it does, and it's spectacular, and it's kind of on purpose. So we'll get to a Delta launch in May or June when this one goes, because they're spectacular, and we'll cover this a lot more then as well. But yes, basically the Delta rocket uses liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen for its propellant. So anytime you've got hydrogen, you've got, and you're flowing that hydrogen through the engines to start to condition them for liftoff, you're always going to have some hydrogen that escapes in gaseous form and collects at the bottom of the rocket. So we have what's known as the Radial Outward Firing Initiator System, or ROFIs. They're basically big sparklers that fire underneath the pad and the rocket to burn off excess hydrogen. But there's a limit of how much hydrogen you actually need to burn off to have it safe. So for the Delta IV, they burn off just enough of the hydrogen to be safe and then light the engines. And the lighting of the engines actually ignites the rest of the hydrogen. So there's this huge fireball that roils up the side of the Delta IV rocket at its main engine ignition. And the Delta IV has actually taken off on fire before as some of its outer thermal protection system is charring and burning away from that liftoff. But for the Delta, that's completely normal. Now, United Launch Alliance has really mitigated that in the years that the Delta has been flying, but it still can happen, and it is spectacular when it does. But it's kind of by design, because they only burn off enough gaseous hydrogen that they need to safely ignite those engines. So we have, a couple things real quick. Solar radiation is verified to be within acceptable limits. So that's our space weather. We don't just care about weather here on the ground. We also care about space weather, and space weather is good to go. We have launch on time verification that has been performed. We are headed toward the opening of our window 9 minutes from now for a liftoff right at 14:57 and 0 seconds. Is when the count will reach T0, with, of course, liftoff coming a second after that. Simon Merton wants to know, so all steps are complete prior to the go, no-go for launch poll, which should be coming up here in about less than a minute. Simon Martin wants to know, what is blowdown? I've heard it mentioned in the timeline. So blowdown is basically once you're in space, there are a couple of different ways that you can vent the remaining propellants that are on board your tanks and depressurize the Centaur, because the Centaur will not be deorbited at the end of this mission. It will remain in space. So in order to make sure that it doesn't explode a couple years from now, because it's still pressurized, they open the pressurization relief valves and vent that pressure out into space. It also vents some of the remaining propellant and oxidizer out into space as well. That's basically blowdown, is just configuring the stage after it's done its job to remain safely in space. And here we go, the go, no go poll. So far everything go. They're still polling. Atlas Booster and Centaur both confirmed they are go on all of their systems. Ground systems now being polled. Ground system still polling, all go so far. All safety systems are go. Range is green and go to proceed. Launch director has given final go for launch, and the launch manager has given permission to proceed to the launch. We are all go for the launch of the Atlas V here in just less than 6 minutes from now. So less than 6 minutes to go until a very happy Atlas V lifts off its launch pad and goes to do its job. We have one final question here in the queue before we get into our launch readiness posture today. Richard Jensen wants to know, could you explain more about the secondary payload on this particular mission? Yes, I certainly can. Give me one quick second. There's one thing I need to do to make sure I'm configured here for the launch part of our poll, and then I will get on here with the secondary payload.
Remember when we were here for that?
So just give me one quick minute and we'll get that answered for you here.
1.7 miles right there. 90.
nothing up on that for me to look at. I swear, yeah, thank you. I swear it was in our launch article, but I can't find it now. So yeah, we're going to get to that question. I read it a bit prematurely here. I'm just making sure I'm all configured on my end for what we need for liftoff here today. And then we will go ahead and get to that. T-minus 4 minutes and counting. We are in the terminal count now for the Atlas V rocket. 3 minutes 54 seconds and ground pyrotechnics have been enabled at this time. Copy, Michael. Yeah, so those secondary payloads that you're talking about, so they're most likely Air Force technology demonstrators. We don't know a lot about them, and the secretive nature of them kind of lends this being an Air Force mission. It's probably something the Air Force is testing out that they don't really want us to know about. And since it's one of their missions, they can ride along on the Atlas just fine. If we get any other information on that, we'll pass that along. But that's the basic answer to the secondary payloads is we really don't know. And we are T-minus 3 minutes and counting. Atlas is now pressurizing for flight. The Atlas booster tanks are pressurizing and liquid oxygen closeouts have begun. How many seconds? Copy that. So just to warn all of you guys, so as we normally do, you don't have to go anywhere else to watch. We have ULA's feed ready to bring up when we lose visual sight of the rocket here with our camera. So it's one-stop shopping. You don't have to go anywhere else, but please be advised that United Launch Alliance's feed being fed to us is about 30 seconds behind real time. So when we make that swap, you're going to hear me call out events that you are then going to see about 30 seconds later. So you'll be getting the real live stuff from me and then seeing it about 30 seconds later when we switch to the ULA feed. The feed you will get from my camera right here is live, but just want to let you guys know what to expect here. So securing of liquid hydrogen is now underway. Launch has been enabled. T-minus 1 minute and counting. Range is green and go to proceed.
With what's going on in the coronavirus situation, so we hope that people will be at home. We hope they'll step outside in their yard and see if they can see this. It's some great pictures instead of the Spectrum 13, but also come back.
Hold.
The launch will have a replay for you. But again, the
Hold occurred at T-minus 46 seconds.
right there at 40 at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station.
Recycling of the count to T-minus 4 minutes and holding now underway.
Always a good sign when we're talking about rocket launches. This happening here on a Thursday afternoon. Normally we would say the kids, hopefully they're at school.
All right, so for those of you just joining us or hearing, we made it to T-minus 46 seconds before a hold was called in the count. And Michael, I just missed what wasn't ready. What was it?
I'm going to go ahead and step aside as we listen to comments.
Okay.
We have a hold. We have a hold. We're listening to some of the commentary.
Yes, so there is a 2-hour launch window. So just because we will not be going at the top of our window.
Launch team
does not necessarily mean that there's a scrub. So hold on, don't go anywhere. We're waiting to hear exactly what it was. All right, and they are recycling the clock to T-minus 4 minutes and holding. So something happened where the launch control team had to flip their switch to not ready. So we are waiting to hear when liftoff will be rescheduled to again, and if they can reschedule. We're just standing by to hear what's going on now. I'm listening to the launch net in my ears. So we have recycled to the T-minus 4 minute mark. So we are continuing to wait for that status update on what happened that caused the last second hold at T-minus 46 seconds. There is a 2-hour launch window that extends to 16:57 EDT, 20:57 UTC. Again, we're just waiting to hear on their end what's going on. So we'll go back to taking some questions in a moment. You're going to hear some quiet air for just a minute. I need to regroup on my end out of launch tracking mode and look at some other things to see what the cause of the issue was right now. Okay, and all ULA is saying right now is that the cause is under investigation. Okay, and if you are just joining us, I'm Chris Gebhardt, live here at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, where you are looking live at an Atlas V rocket on Launch Complex 41. The launch countdown had gone absolutely perfectly with no major issues, so to speak. of until T-minus 46 seconds. We made it 46 seconds away from ignition of the RD-180 engine and liftoff of the Atlas V when a hold was called for a reason that we don't yet know. They have not said it over the launch net, and ULA is only, United Launch Alliance is saying that the cause for the hold is under investigation. To slightly recap right now, the teams are recycling the vehicle back to the T-minus 4 minutes and holding mark, which is the stable hold point before the terminal count sequence is initiated at the T-minus 4 minute mark and counting. So, so the rocket is stable, and the teams are working through all of their steps to keep the rocket in this stable configuration as the teams go off and look at what the cause of the issue was and when they might be able to try again. So we do have a 2-hour-long launch window that remains open until 16:57 Eastern Daylight Time today, which is 20:57 UTC. Again, we don't know what the cause of the hold was. The teams are the teams are still investigating that. So we're going to go ahead and go back to some of your questions here if we've got any. And we're going to go back to those in just a second. You're going to hear a little quiet air for just a second. One of the wonderful things about my job is multitasking. So I was supposed to interview Northrop Grumman at 4 p.m. Eastern today about their Omega rocket. But in setting up the interview, I made sure they were aware that the Atlas was launching today, and they said that if anything delays the Atlas beyond the opening of the launch window, to let them know so we could reschedule the interview. So I now have to go send that email. So I'm going to go send that. Das, I don't suspect you're by any chance able to take over the commentary here real quick. Are you by chance? Yeah, so actually instead of dead air, we're going to throw it over to Das here in about a minute, so that he can keep us going here on our live stream and start taking your questions. So if you've got any questions, throw them up into chat. Even if you think it's already been answered, ask it again. We'll go ahead and get it answered. Das, while you're getting ready to take over for me, I can answer one right now. Philip wanted to know, can we explain how they came up with the rocket configuration name, example N22 or 511 or things like that? So yes, so for the Atlas V, there are multiple different configurations. So after that Roman numeral V in Atlas V, the 3 numbers that follow it actually dictate what the configuration of the vehicle is. That first number can either be a 4 or a 5. It denotes the diameter of the payload fairing. So it's either a 4-meter payload fairing or a 5-meter payload fairing. Today's flies with 5. In the event that it's a Starliner mission and there is no payload fairing, they put an N there to indicate no payload fairing. The second number is the number of solid rocket motors that are attached to the Atlas V booster. That can range anywhere from 0 to 5. And the Atlas can fly with an odd number of solid rockets as well. It can fly with 1, 3, and 5 in addition to 2 and 4. Today's configuration is a 5 solid rocket booster configuration. And the thrust vector control system, the ability of the RD-180 main engine on the Atlas to gimbal, is what allows the Atlas to fly with an odd number of solid rocket boosters. And then that last number can either be a 1 or a 2, and that is the number of engines on the Centaur upper stage. So today's Atlas is a 551, indicating a 5-meter payload fairing, a 5 solid rocket booster configuration, and a single engine Centaur upper stage. Oh, here we go. So recycle is complete and the Atlas V is in a safe and stable configuration. And they are waiting to have the briefing to the launch team about what caused the abort and kicked them out of the terminal count. And according to Tori Bruno, the president and CEO of United Launch Alliance, the the hold rather was called due to a red line indication on one of the components of the Atlas. He did not get more specific than that. So basically something on the Atlas breached one of its operational limits. Could be a sensor, could be something real. We'll let the teams go off and think about that. And Das, are you ready to take over for me on the commentary here? All right, cool. Then I'm going to kick it back over to Das as I send off a couple of emails that I need to do to rearrange my afternoon in case we're here to the end of the window. I'm going to kick it back over to Das, and then I'll be back shortly.
And then mic check. Make sure you can hear me here. All right, good. So we're good to go. I'm back here in the studio. I'm Das. I've been running the live stream sort of behind the scenes, and we are standing by, I believe, to get a new time here. So there was a 2-hour window. Like Chris was saying, this doesn't mean that it's the end of the launch. That doesn't mean that we're not going today. You see different windows that happen, right? You'll hear an instantaneous window, which means that it's one shot. A lot of the times when you're going to the space station, right, you have a cargo mission, one of those CRS contracts going up to the space station, you'll hear these instantaneous windows. And for AEHF-6 here today with United Launch Alliance on that 551, it is not instantaneous. They had, I believe it was a 2-hour window, right? And we are waiting for them to tell us what the new time is going to be. So I think everything is good to go here. Chris G doing a fantastic job down there at the Cape. Again, operating under limited social distancing, media distancing, what do you want to call it? Limited press capacity at Cape Canaveral today. And Chris is out there with the live stream cam. Everything's been working fantastically. I shouldn't have said that because now something's going to go wrong with our camera or our modem or something, but knock on wood, it still hangs in there. I do have YouTube chat up over here, and I saw that Chris sort of went through all of the questions and stuff. If there are any other questions, continue tossing them in there, and we will we'll keep standing by for a new time. We're just waiting for a new T- time from United Launch Alliance to see what our hold is going to be. So, how has everything been going for y'all today? Just let's fill the dead air. Not really. I am always curious where people are watching from. So we are reaching a pretty good number of people right now. And do this for me. I want you to try and overload chat. It was a hydraulic issue. Chris just told me that it was a hydraulic issue that kicked them out. We're still waiting for that time, but Chris just said hydraulic issue. Okay, he's still listening. Okay, they're going to go discuss something. Chris is relaying me information from the LaunchNet. And I'm like, I hold my ear up. I don't actually have an earpiece in. But look at where all the people... Oh, my gosh. What? The chat is insane right now. That is with slow mode on. Rocket Chaser, where's your camera location? Michael Baylor could put the camera location up right quick if I switch the other one over. But look at people watching from all over the world. There is not... I like to show off, and I'm like, look how quickly I can read the places where people are watching from. And I'm sorry, there is not a snowball's chance that I can read that. There's just no way. But there are definitely people watching from all over the world. That is so amazing. I will say that I am very happy. I'm glad that we can still bring you these live streams. I know that a lot of people all over the world are sheltered in place, not going anywhere because of what's going on with the coronavirus. And it is fantastic that we're still able to share this with you while everybody's sort of stuck at home. Massive thanks. When Chris G comes back on, massive thanks to Chris G and some massive props for Chris G packing up his stuff, getting in his car, driving down to the Cape to bring us this launch video. In fact, I've got his launch video up. I could bring his launch video back over. This is United Launch Alliance rolling like a commercial for rockets right now. If anybody needs a rocket, you can call up United Launch Alliance. Rocketbuilder.com, I think, is what they have. The chat is still scrolling from people watching all over the world. Space Coast Honda, not sponsored by Space Coast Honda, but that's a place to be watching from, I guess. Puerto Rico, St. Louis, it's all over the place. Germany, Kansas City. And Chris, I think you can still hear me when I'm talking. What is your status over there? How much time are we looking at?
Oh, until I'm ready to take back over?
Yes, yes.
Anytime you want. I sent the email.
Okay. Oh, okay. Good deal. Do you want me to keep talking? Do you need a little bit of a break, or up to you?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So Chris G had to do a couple things, but I just checked in with him, and I checked in with him by turning and talking at a laptop over here. But let's go ahead and toss it back to Chris G down at the Cape. He is good to go, and we will bring his camera back online. Chris, you are good to...
All right. Well, you know, I do have to say huge thanks to Northrop Grumman, because as soon as I emailed them and said, hey, the Atlas didn't make the top of its window and we don't know, it could go anywhere between 10 minutes from now and 4:57 p.m., so that's obviously not going to work for our 4 p.m. interview. It's great emailing another rocket company about that, because they understand perfectly what these dynamic situations on the ground are like. So huge shout out to Jennifer at Northrop Grumman for rescheduling with me. We obviously knew this might be something, so we planned for it ahead of time, but it's always great when companies understand what's going on. So super thanks there. So yeah, as DOS was able to relay to you, we did hear over the net a call out that it was a hydraulic issue that got them at T-minus 46 seconds. They did not say what... Okay, and Tori Bruno on Twitter is saying it was a ground hydraulics accumulator that malfunctioned. So they are going off to look at that. The exact quote over the launch net was, it was a hydraulic issue and we need to go off to discuss it. So they are off doing that now, and we'll come back with a recommendation here on whether this is something that can be fixed or something that they can accept as an as-is condition, since it's on the ground and not the vehicle, and launch. But we don't know yet. We don't know what they're leaning toward, what they might, how serious this particular issue is on the hydraulic accumulator on the ground side. So to be very honest with all of you, this could be anywhere from we've gone off, we've looked at it, we understand it, we can accept it as is, reset the count, clock, and launch, to nope, this is a vital system that we need for post-launch safing and securing operations of the launch pad, so we cannot accept it as is and we need to stand down for the day. It could be anywhere in that range of possibilities. So we really do not know yet. As soon as we do, we will bring it to you. We will, of course, bring it to you. But that's where we are right now. They are off looking at this. So Philip West had a comment. How common are delays like this? Which is an excellent question, right? And you know, for the Atlas V and the Delta IV rocket family, these get into terminal counts and get kicked out are more common for these rockets, for the Atlas V and the Delta IV, than with other rockets. It's you know, it's just kind of is what it is. You know, the Falcon 9s don't run into this all this often. The Soyuzes almost never run into it. I mean, my God, if the Soyuz has a problem, the world is ending. Those vehicles are so reliable and just bang on the money. But, you know, these things do happen. These little glitches just seem to hit ULA in bigger proportions than other companies, or hit systems with ULA, or hit in ways that ULA systems, you have to stop and figure out what it is instead of being able to figure it out on the fly and go with it, because of how structured the final 4-minute terminal count sequence is with the Falcon, with the Atlas V. So they do seem to be common. We had a lot of these little issues that delayed the launch of AEHF-6 back in August of last year. Thankfully, we didn't hit any of them on Solar Orbiter. We've also seen them hit a couple snags where they've been doing pad ops on windy days, and connection lines have broken because of high winds, and they needed to roll back to go reconnect them and then roll back out to the pad. You know, this is all sort of life on the rocket range, and you know, as I said, they do seem to hit ULA more so than other companies, but it's not that other companies are immune to it. It's just the little things that hiccup in your system as you're working through these incredibly complex operations. And a rocket launch isn't necessarily, it certainly is not like driving your car, right? Where your car can give you a check engine light, but you can still drive it that 30 minutes to work and it'll be fine. A rocket gives you a check engine light and you better stop and make sure that you know exactly what it's telling you. And a lot of times it is fine and we can pick up the count and we can continue on and launch today. But those stop and discuss moments are very, very, very important. Very, very important here as well. So the Atlas V is still fully fueled. So Tasku, to answer your question, the smoke that we see on the rocket isn't actually smoke. It's gaseous oxygen that's venting out of the Atlas V and Centaur upper stage tanks. So as the liquid oxygen is cryogenic and pumped in at many hundreds of well below 100 degrees Fahrenheit, it boils off and it turns into a gas inside the propellant tanks, and we have to vent that gas out of the tanks and refill the amount that is boiled off, and we call that stable replenish. So right now the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen is in stable replenish, so they're still flowing those super cold propellants into the tanks at the same rate that they're boiling off, basically, so keeping the tanks perpetually full. But that venting that you're seeing, that smoke that you're seeing, is gaseous oxygen that's just being vented away from the rocket right now. So again, if you joined us just before launch, we made it to T-minus 46 seconds, and hold was called out over the net because of a hydraulic accumulator issue on the ground side. Now that's good in that it's not the rocket that malfunctioned. The rocket did not have an issue. It was something on the ground. What they're off discussing now, what the teams at United Launch Alliance are off discussing now, is how serious is this issue? How well is it understood? Is it something that can be accepted as is and allow the rocket to launch with just a change in the computer software to ignore that so it doesn't kick them back out at T-minus 46 seconds again? Or is this something much more serious, something that's needed after launch for pad safing operations that they simply cannot do without? That's the conversation they're having right now. What those conversations result in will be the final outbrief to the launch control team based on the recommendation of what to do for today. To be very honest with all of you and to not, hold anything back, it could be anything from it's acceptable and we can go ahead and launch, to we actually need to send someone back into the pad to go do something while the rocket is fully fueled. So someone needs to go do that and make a fix before we can proceed with the count, or we're done for the day and we need to scrub. We don't know which option they're going to go with. They are off talking about that, but for the sake of full disclosure and so everyone sort of knows what to expect, those are the range of options. Those are the three main options that we have today with this particular issue. Das, if you are able to take back over for me, I could really use water and go find water from somebody. So if you're available to take back over, I'd really appreciate it, Das. Cool, copy. Then I'm going to throw it over to Das for a few minutes. Das is going to take you through the next few parts of our commentary while I try to go find water.
All right, work with me there. Let's make sure I have microphone audio. Mic check. Am I good? All right, I'm good. Excellent. I'm juggling so many things. I literally have to start talking and then see if the audio's making it to the right place. So again, let me flip back over this way, like that. And we're still standing by, waiting to hear from United Launch Alliance on whether or not... Oh! This is weird. This isn't the right stream to bring up. That's not what we intended to do at all. Let's go back over to this camera right here. It's the Recursion. Welcome to our Recursion rocket launch live stream. Again, like I was saying, we're standing by United Launch Alliance going off to review that issue with the ground equipment, it sounded like. And we will see if we are going to get another launch attempt today or we are going to push this launch. Again, it was a 2-hour window. We just entered the 2-hour window. What are we looking at? Not quite 30 minutes ago. So we still have opportunities to go today. We still have opportunities to go. So again, let me see. Bring up Twitch chat or bring up YouTube chat again over here. I'm running 2 streams right now. I'm running a stream to my Twitch channel and I'm running a stream for NASASpaceflight. And so sometimes we like go behind the scenes and we talk behind the scenes while Chris is talking. But I think we are all good over here. If you have a question, you can certainly ask it into chat. We don't have, when is the launch? So right now we don't know what the recycle time is. We don't know if it's going to change, or we don't know. We don't know what time the launch would be rescheduled for. Dab, please. We only dab for super chats. Thank you. Appreciate that. Waiting for a tow truck. I'm pretty sure they're not waiting for a tow truck out there. Are the SRBs reused? No, we are not reusing the SRBs. The solid rocket motors on the side of the Atlas V do not get reused. That's a good question. What is the fuel and oxidizer? So, John Ecott, you're asking what is the fuel and oxidizer? The SRB is, of course, not fuel and oxidizer, but it should be RP1, and what is the oxidizer? It's liquid oxidizer, I guess, in the main stage right there. Just 1 second. Hang on a second. Okay, they didn't need me there. Wow, okay, there's a lot of questions here, and I'm pulling them straight off a chat like a lightning round. What is the difference between an abort and a scrub? So hold would be another good question to put in there. What is the difference between a hold, an abort, and a scrub? I think an abort and a scrub are sort of the same thing because an abort or a scrub usually means we're going to do this another day. A hold usually means that we are going to get a new time today. So we may come up to a hold, and if they say hold, 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 they may still think they can go today, but they're not sure. They just need to hold and check something out.
Make sure to tell them that an abort is a likely scrub for the day on an Atlas only, but an abort on a Falcon 9 is not.
Ah, okay, so Chris is telling me that he's listening in the background. There are 2 different types, and it's the company you're talking about, I guess, right? So the abort for the Atlas, when Atlas calls an abort, that means that they're not going today, but different companies use different terminology, and when SpaceX says it's an abort, in their terminology, that might be they're still going to go later today. And this, I guess, just different companies using different technologies. But for this, for United Launch Alliance, an abort or a scrub would mean we're not going to space today, we're going to roll this back to another time, versus a hold across the board usually just means, whoa, something's not quite right. Let's give some time to have a look at it and then determine whether or not we're going to go today. That was a good question. This is in Florida. That was another good question. Do not dab. I'm with you on that one. Our Centaur upper stages generally deorbited after mission completion. I think they're either deorbited or they go to a graveyard orbit. They don't just leave them in operational orbits. They do have a plan on what they're going to do with them. But I can't tell you, like, 40% of the time they're deorbited and 60% they go to a graveyard orbit. Like, I don't know that answer off the top of my head, but I know that they do have a plan to dispose of them so that they minimize the impact on other operational satellites. That's a good question. That is a good question. I'm just still scrolling down for chat. How long will it be in space? Which part are you talking about, Griffin? That's a good question. How long will it be in space? If you're talking about the satellite, the mission time frame for the satellite is in tens of years, right? If you're talking about the upper stage or the boosters or something like that, the SRBs don't go to space. The booster doesn't go to space. The Centaur will end up in space, but I can't tell you. It'll be up there for 3 months or whatever, right? I don't know that one off the top of my head. And the satellite will be up there for anybody in the studio. Do we know the expected mission time frame?
The Atlas booster itself will actually technically make it above the Kármán line.
So Chris is listening over here as well and said the booster will technically make it above the Kármán line, but it won't stay there. There you go. I like this. I'm just sort of hanging out, and when I answer something, people can help me with the answers. That's actually quite nice. Chris is continuing to look for some water over on his end. So I don't work for ULA. They just have an online gift shop, and I was able to buy this purple shirt. I bought the purple shirt because I stream on Twitch, and it was purple, and I had $23, right? So I do not work for ULA. Neither do I work for the Air Force. I have the hat on here. It does not mean that I work for the Air Force either. I am just I'm an independent person who does live streams, and I'm helping out NASASpaceflight with their live streams and talking sometimes whenever they need me to. Continue to scroll down. Why are there 5 boosters and not 6? So why are there 5 SRBs? The Atlas V can operate in multiple different modes from 0 to 5 SRBs. And I guess the answer is when they designed it, they didn't see a need for 6 SRBs. I couldn't tell you that it was because the framework couldn't hold the force of 6 SRBs, but 5 was just fine. I don't think that would be it. It's just when they designed the rocket, they said, hey, Atlas can sometime launch with 1, or sometimes launch with none, or sometimes launch with 4, and they just determined that 5 was going to be the number. That'd be a great question for United Launch Alliance, actually. Why did they stick to 5? Or why did they max out at 5, I guess? But I don't know off the top of my head. Let's see here. Sam, I do have multiple different shirts, and based on the broadcast, I changed my shirt out. If Starliner's launching, I got one of those. If other space companies are launching, I got one of those. I do, in fact, have multiple different shirts that I can wear, and I know how to change them. I worked that out myself. Let's keep going here. And I know I'm not getting every question. I know there's so many good questions in chat. I really appreciate y'all asking everything. Yes, you're seeing trouble not seeing my chat. Nice. Seeing my hat. Let's see here. Where was Atlas V made? There's a graphic, and I don't have the graphic handy, but the United Launch Alliance has a graphic that shows where it's made. Michael, do you have that graphic anywhere? I'm going to ask, because if I can get the graphic, I can bring it up and show you where all the different parts of the Atlas V come together. All right, yeah, we may have that graphic in just a second, then I can bring it up on the screen here. Question, and I'm going to keep going while we wait for that graphic. If they scrub the launch, will it be rescheduled? That's a good question. That's a good question. Will it stay on the pad? Will they take the rocket off the pad? It depends on what's wrong, and it depends on when they can reschedule for, right? So with the graphic. Oh, I got the graphic. Where'd you put the graphic at? I'm not... Oh, okay. I can't really show it that way. I'm not quite set up to show it that way, so if you just paste it into Discord, I can bring it up really easily. Yeah, sorry. Where is the Atlas V made? We're getting the graphic for that. Sorry, we had a little bit of a thing behind the scenes. Yeah. Sorry about that. So we'll get that in just a second. What is blowdown? That is actually a good question. I believe blowdown is where they are, and I'm going to say this out loud, and y'all are going to correct me on this. What was that, Michael? Okay, I don't think I quite heard him there. If I'm not mistaken, you know something? I actually don't know the answer to this. I'm going to ask first. So I'm going to ask first. What is blowdown? Because I don't want to answer wrong, right? That is a good question. I saw it. Somebody pasted it over here so I wouldn't miss it. And I will ask somebody who knows. If I had to guess, it has something to do with clearing lines around the top of it. But again, I'm the live streamer guy. I'm not the reporter or the expert. I'm not the engineer for the rocket, so I don't want to say the wrong answer. It's propellant venting. Okay, it is propellant venting. So it's when they're emptying out lines to make the stage passive. Yes. So it is about emptying out propellant to make the stage passive. Of second stage after completion of mission. I'm getting information over here. So not while it's on the pad, but it blows down the propellants to make the stage passive after the completion of the mission. So it's after Centaur's actually done the work and the payload is separated, then they go through blowdown and it's almost like safing the second stage, if I had to make that up. Again, this is something that's super important to me. I don't know everything, and I like to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, which isn't a hard thing to do. But I don't want to provide bad information. So often I see people who are like, oh, well, it's this, and they say something that's not right. And if I don't know the right answer, I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to ask the literal team of experts over here who know the right answer. So I do not like to be the guy just because I figured out how to turn on a camera that I can tell you how everything works. It was ULA logo for a second. So let me scroll through here again and see if there's anything else. What is a graveyard orbit? Graveyard orbit is an orbit where the satellite won't mess with stuff. Does that make sense? So it's something where you don't have it in sort of a useful lane, right? I don't know if we have a graphic for that or not. I don't think we do. But it's basically, if you're sending something up to GTO, right, and you're sending a satellite on a geosynchronous or a geotransfer orbit, you don't want your stage passing through that operational band where you have active satellites. The stage is done. It's done its work. It doesn't need to be there in that position. Its job was to get the satellite that has the antennas and the solar panels and the batteries and the computers on it, right? So once it's done that, okay, I'm listening to a battery check from Chris. Chris, I copied that. Thank you. Yeah. To make sure that he has enough battery to make it through the end of the launch window. But also, I have 2 backups as well. And he's got backup batteries. Good. So once the upper stage has delivered the satellite, which is the actual mission, on that trajectory, you don't want that stage flying through that useful space basically anymore. So they'll put it in a graveyard orbit, which is basically an orbit where they know where it is, because we track this stuff. We don't want used stages to crash into each other and just Kessler all out and start throwing bolts and bits of stuff all over space. And it's also a place where it won't affect other satellites. That's probably a pretty good answer for what a graveyard orbit is. I just made that up. I'm pretty sure it's right. Okay. Chris verified. He's like, sounds good. This is the thing that I will do. Like, when I tell you something, I will always make sure that I am telling you when I don't know the answer. Like, I can tell you what 551 means. I can take a wag at a graveyard orbit and just be like, I think that's the answer. But if I don't know, I'll ask the experts. What is the delta V of this rocket? John Ecott, what is the delta V of this rocket? You know something? That's something we should be able to figure out. I don't know off the top of my head what the delta V of this rocket. Do you play Kerbal? Because that's like a very Kerbal thing to ask. It would have to be enough delta V to get the satellite, because delta V takes into account the mass of the satellite, up to the trajectory that it's going on. But I can't tell you that's X number of meters per second or X number of miles. I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly how much delta V. Experts! Does anybody in the studio know how much delta V it requires to go on the trajectory that this is being delivered to? Because remember, delta V takes into account the mass of the payload, so it doesn't matter if you're sending a cell phone or you're sending a school bus on this orbit. It matters that you're trying to get to this orbit that has this much energy. And whatever satellite's going, it should be the same amount of delta V to get it there. But I don't know off the top of my head. You play Kerbal? Nice. I play some Kerbal too. Look, check this out. I got like Kerbal. It's a 3D printed Soyuz that I made in stock Kerbal, and then we sent it to a 3D printer and got it printed out. I've spent. I should like replace this rocket with this 3D printed thing. It's quite nice actually. I've spent a couple hours playing Kerbal Space Program. Let's see here. What's the payload's purpose? I'm going to just keep lightning around. I know that I'm missing some of the questions, y'all. There's so many great questions that are coming through chat, and I'm streaming to 2 places right now. What's the payload's purpose? It is a military communications satellite. AEHF stands for Advanced Extremely High Frequency, -6, the 6th one. So it is a military communications satellite. The use of the satellite is going to be shared across multiple nations. But that's... Oh, nice. Someone said Chris was able to get the delta V. See, this is why we have Chris do most of the talking. Chris, what was it?
So for a typical geostationary transfer orbit, it is 9.88 kilometers per second of delta V.
9.88. Y'all should have been able to hear what he said there, but it's 9.88 kilometers per second. Yeah, of delta V. There you go. This is almost like cheating, where there are people in the background who can look up the answers that I don't know. I like this. If this delay goes on much more, I'm just going to bring Kerbal up in the background, and we're going to launch this rocket in Kerbal if we have to. We're getting an update. I think that was they just got word that they understood the issue and they're working on a solution. Did I copy that correctly? Okay. I don't actually have an earpiece in. This is your visual aid that I'm listening to something somebody's telling me. Sure, yeah.
I was listening to you explain that, but yeah.
Absolutely. So y'all, it sounds like Chris is good to go, and we will send it back to the expert out in the field, Chris Gebhardt. Chris, I'm going to switch you on, and I will let you know you are good to go.
All right. Well, thank you, Doss. My quest to find water was successful, although I promptly choked on it when I began to drink it and coughed. And if there's one thing you don't want to do during a viral pandemic, it is cough, because I thought people were going to get whiplash when they turned around to look at me. That was kind of funny, but it was just me choking on my water, as I do on a near daily basis, because yay, adulting. But anyway, Doss, thank you so much. I was listening to the answers there that you were giving, and I just wanted to add a couple of little things to those because they actually dovetailed together quite nicely. There was the question about, well, why does this mission? Why do some missions need 5 solid rockets? Why do others need none? What's the delta V to get needed that the rocket needs to do to get the mass of AEHF-6 into its geostationary transfer orbit? And those two questions that were asked separately are actually tied together to give us the answer to each other. So the amount of delta V, 9.88 kilometers per second of delta V, is what the Atlas V needs to impart onto the AEHF-6 satellite to get it into its transfer orbit today, its correct transfer orbit today. So in order to do that, right, in order to go, okay, the Atlas is the rocket that we're using, this is how much delta V it has to provide to get the satellite where it's going. Then you start looking at, okay, well, how much delta V with that mass of a payload could the Atlas with no solid rocket boosters do? And the answer is not enough. It couldn't give you the amount of delta V with the rate ratio that it's got with the satellite. So then you go, okay, how much would it give us if we stuck a single solid rocket on it? Not enough. And you just keep going through that, right? I mean, this is the basic way of answering it, is you just keep going through it until you get to, okay, even strapping 4 solid rocket boosters onto this thing wouldn't give us the amount of delta V related to the mass of the spacecraft that we need at spacecraft separation. So 5 solid rocket boosters can give us all of that, and that's what we do. So that's how we arrive at the answer of why this mission needed 5 solid rocket boosters, because of the total amount of delta V it needed to give the mass of this particular satellite. Now, here's where all of that comes into play, because yes, there's a tremendous amount of force and thrust unleashed in the first 90 seconds of this flight, right, as the 5 solid rocket boosters burn. But it's actually not the first part of flight that we're really worried about in terms of that total amount of delta V imparted onto the vehicle. What we're really trying to do with those 5 solid rocket boosters is get it to a point that when the Centaur upper stage cuts off and it's in its initial parking orbit, this orbit that it will arrive in 11.5 minutes after liftoff, where it then coasts for a little bit and then reignites its engine to do the other burns, right, to get it to impart the correct delta V in the correct orbit and everything like that. And it's actually about leaving a lot more propellant in the Centaur to allow it to do all of those burns and impart all of that delta V. That's actually why we need the 5 solid rocket boosters here on the ground, because it saves propellant in the Centaur later on down, that you use later on down the mission. So it's a wonderful balancing act of adding more propellant to preserve some propellant to allow the rocket to accelerate enough based on the mass that it's trying to accelerate. So it's a wonderfully complicated formula that they have to use, but the two questions asked separately were actually connected to one another, and I'm really glad they were both asked because that's perfect and that helps us understand it better. I hope I explained that well, and if not, that's what question and answer time is for, when Chris needs to step back and explain a little bit better. So just to sort of recap for you here, so it was a ground hydraulic accumulator issue that got them at T-minus 46 seconds. They backed out of the terminal count. They are currently holding at T-minus 4 minutes, which is the stable hold point. The launch anomaly team went off and discussed, and is still discussing, what happened and what they saw on sensors, and Tori Bruno had tweeted that in those discussions they do understand the problem now. So the first step of that is to go off and discuss and make sure you understand the problem. They do. They know what happened. But the question that they're now working through is what to do with that. Whether this is something they can work and either get comfortable with as is and launch, or work and fix, or not be able to fix and understand, or not be able to fix in enough time to meet the end of our launch window, which is an hour and 15 minutes from now. So an hour and 15 minutes remaining in our launch window. So some time for the team to stand by and keep working this and everything. Jim, thank you so much. Jim just brought me a gigantic thing of water. I love him. On a second note, I know exactly where my water is that I intended to bring and where it is sitting on my kitchen counter right now, but that does mean no good an hour south. But anyway, that's where we are right now. So the teams are off discussing what the best course of action is. That's what we're waiting for. So while we wait that out and to hear if they'll be able to resolve it in enough time to launch today, or if we'll be back with you tomorrow, we will continue taking some of your questions. So if you've got questions, keep throwing them up. Keep throwing them up. And Sadie, thanks so much for the super chat. Really, really appreciate it. Das, Sadie actually has a question for you. So we're going to have to throw it back to you here in a minute. I've got a couple other questions to answer here, but it's definitely a question for Das. I like that. So before we throw that question to Das from Sadie, let's go back up because Kaczor, Kaczor, no idea if I'm saying that correctly. Apologies if I'm not, wants to know, for future launches, would you recommend Playa Linda Beach for viewing? I would definitely recommend Playa Linda Beach for viewing of missions off of Pad 39A. The trick with Playa Linda, and to really help you guys out in terms of understanding, this is Playa Linda is really great to see some of the pads at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, but a lot of them are also blocked by the sand dunes and by how far down the beach you can progress. So if you're looking at Playa Linda Beach as a viewing location, Google search some images of rocket launches that have been taken from there so you can get a sense of, will I be able to see the Atlas pad? Will I be able to see the Falcon 9 pad on Cape Canaveral? That way you don't go there expecting to be able to actually see it on the launch pad and then find out that you only get to see it 10 seconds after it lifts off when it clears the tree line. I would always recommend doing that no matter where you're going in the area. Make sure wherever you're going, you know you have a clean line of sight to the pad, because as awesome as it is to hear and see them, you know, there's something special about actually watching the engines ignite on the pad and the vehicle start to lift away from its launch mounts and everything. So I'll always look for that. So NASASpaceflight, how do the RD-180 engines ignite? Is it T-Tab like SpaceX's Merlin engines? Yes, it is. It is T-Tab. In fact, you can see on night launches, you can see very clearly the green flash of the T-Tab igniting the RD-180 engine just before liftoff. So yes, it is T-Tab. And here's a good thing too, because we'll see it a little bit as the Atlas launches and climbs off the pad today. So the RD1, the Russian-made RD-180 engine, is a phenomenal engine, a workhorse engine that has a tremendous safety and success record. It's why United Launch Alliance and their predecessor chose them for the Atlas rockets, and chose the RD series of engines for the Atlas rockets. But you'll see two nozzles sticking out the back of it, but it's not two engines. It's a single engine, dual chamber rocket engine, basically. So it's only one combustion chamber that just funnels everything down into two nozzles for the thrust exhaust and the power and everything that's directed out the back end of the Atlas. So a single engine with two nozzles is what the RD-180 is. And again, we'll see that as the rocket lifts off and as the solid rockets burn out and separate. So wanted to make sure to mention that as they go through. All right, and we have an update from Tori that Michael's going to read to me. Okay, so there was a bad amplifier card on a ground hydraulic system. They are working on a solution. That is the update that we have. So no time frame or anything like that, but we still have 69 minutes left in our launch window today. Again, it's 15:48 local time, and the launch window extends to 16:57 local time, or 20:57 UTC. So about 68 minutes left in our window for the teams to work this and figure it out. We will stay with you throughout all of this to put DOS and Michael's mind at ease. We have 68 minutes left in the launch window and 150 minutes of battery power remaining on the first of 3 batteries that I have with me. So we're good. We will run out of window before we run out of battery. That's kind of our motto whenever NSF goes live streaming. Always make sure you have more battery than window. But anyway, so that's our update. That's where we stand right this second. A question was also, what is DOS's Twitch handle? DOS Valdez. DASVALDEZ. That is DOS's Twitch handle. For those of you who were wondering there. Dr. Bacon, thanks so much for the super chat. I really do appreciate it. Are you asking if I flew to the launch? If that's what you're asking, the answer is no. I did not fly to the launch. I live here. So it was just a matter of running to my car and driving here. For me, if that wasn't what you meant by your question, just let us know and we'll get it answered to you. Hey DOS, if you're listening, oh, hang on one second. Okay, so as the Atlas remains in a prolonged hold here at T-minus 4 minutes, I was pausing to listen to the launch net as they were talking, and they're just doing extended hold adjustments to some of the properties on the Atlas that they have to do as the vehicle remains loaded with cryogenic fuel for prolonged periods of time. So they're just keeping Atlas nice and healthy and happy and stable until they can work through the issue. And determine a course of action here, which they are continuing to do at this point. But DOS, if you can hear me, we actually have a super chat question that came specifically for you. Whenever you are ready, yeah. So whenever you're available to jump on here, I'm going to hand it off to you after I ask this question to you, if you're ready for it. All right. So this specifically came from Sadie Kimberlin, and it was a super chat. It came with a super chat. And it says, hey DOS, please, what happens when a rocket fails? I'll throw that over to you now, DOS. Correct. Yes. That was the question for you, DOS. you still hear me, Michael, or no? Okay. Okay. So as DOS prepares to answer that question, what happens when a rocket fails? Let's just go for those of you who have joined us and have been on here with us since 1:30. Thank you so much. When we went live over about 2.5 hours ago now, you know, just from myself and from the team at NASASpaceflight, thank you so much. For supporting us, for watching these streams, for engaging with them. You know, one thing that we really always want to do is answer questions, engage with everyone. So, you know, wherever you're watching from around the world, let us know. If you've got questions, send them in. Even if you think they're questions that have already been asked. Even if you think it might already have been asked, or you're nervous to ask it, especially if you're nervous to ask it, go ahead and ask the question. We had someone earlier in the day who you know, said, I'm a total noob at this. I'm a total newbie to this, and had a great question, even though they seemed a little concerned to. I'm sorry, if you can hear me. I'm sorry, if I'm live, I had to stop to listen to what DOS was saying in my ear. Michael, who's live? Let me ask that. I am, good, okay. DOS, is that you telling me that you want to kick that question over to me? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and answer the question that was directed to DOS. So what happens when a rocket fails? This is from Sadie. So the answer to that really depends where in its mission profile does it fail. Does it fail on the ground before the hold down clamps release? That could result in anything from a controlled engine shutdown on the pad and safing of the vehicle and systems to detank and preserve everything to try again. It could mean an explosion on the launch pad, in which case the rocket, the payload, most of the pad infrastructure would be destroyed. A close to ground launch failure of a rocket could spread debris, you know, outwards of a mile, depending on how close to the ground it was and how far downrange it had made it at the time of the breakup of the vehicle. The failure of a rocket, you know, if a rocket were to fail with an engine shutdown, 1 second before the engine was supposed to shut down anyway, there wouldn't be a huge impact to the mission, because at that point the craft is orbital. So if it was a low Earth orbit mission, the satellite might be pretty much where it was supposed to be, minus a few meters per second, which satellite and spacecraft onboard propellants can account for and counter. You know, we've had, let's just keep this with the Atlas real quick, because we've actually had a couple of failures of the Atlas, one of the Centaur and one of the Atlas booster itself, that were not explosive failures, but early shutdown failures. On a Cygnus resupply mission to the International Space Station, the Atlas booster shut down 4 seconds early. And the Centaur upper stage compensated for that by changing its pitch angle during its flight and burning the Centaur nearly to propellant depletion, within half a second of propellant depletion, to get Cygnus into the correct orbit. So even though there was an Atlas booster failure and a 4-second early shutdown of the RD-180, the mission was still a complete success, and the Centaur compensated and got the Cygnus resupply craft exactly where it was supposed to be. Had that booster shut down 1 second earlier, 5 seconds early instead of 4, Centaur would have run out of propellant, and we likely would have lost the Cygnus vehicle at that point, because it would have been suborbital when the Centaur ran out of propellant. The Centaur also malfunctioned at one point early on in Atlas's career with an early cutoff and put the payload into the wrong orbit, but the satellites were able to recover on their own from that, and the payload customer ended up declaring it mission success, which is how we still arrive at the 100% mission success of the Atlas, even though it has had 2 issues with it. So they can range anything from that to, you know, an explosion during first stage flight, or a breakup during first stage flight is the end of the mission. So it really, it's a wonderful question, Sadie, because it really holds a very complicated answer of where in the flight profile it fails. Because sometimes you can recover from it, and we have before. But it's a great question. Great question. Thank you so much. So Zach TNT, the Space and Learning channel, wants to know, what is our window? Yes, so our window today is 2 hours long. It opened at 14:57 EDT, or 16:47, or I'm sorry, 18:47. Sorry, I'm gonna stop and start that answer all over again. How long is our launch window? Our launch window is 2 hours. It opened at 14:57 local time here in Florida, which was 18:57 UTC. And it closes at 16:57, which is 59 minutes from now. And the time conversion to that is 20:57 UTC. So we have about 58.5 minutes left in our window as it stands right now. And Dr. Bacon, oh yes, so Dr. Bacon had asked earlier, so sorry, so did it fly to the launch? And I couldn't figure out if you were asking if I had flown to the launch or what. So I answered it for me, that I drove. You actually meant the rocket. Yes, okay, that helps. No, the rocket actually didn't fly to its launch site. So the Atlas V rockets, the Atlas V Gold Booster and the Centaur upper stage, are all built in Decatur, Alabama on the Tennessee River. And then they are loaded onto a huge river and sea ship that ULA calls Rocket Ship. They are loaded onto there in Decatur, Alabama. They are taken up the Tennessee River. I believe it's the Tennessee to the Ohio to the Mississippi, and then down the Mississippi into the Gulf of Mexico, around the Florida Peninsula, and up to Cape Canaveral, where they then dock at Port Canaveral, and then the boosters are offloaded there and towed to their checkout and integration facilities here at Cape Canaveral. And that is the same with the Delta IV rockets built by United Launch Alliance as well. They are built in Decatur, Alabama, put on the rocket ship, taken by river up to the Mississippi, and then down into the Gulf, around the Florida Peninsula, and into Florida. And that is a picture of Rocket Ship, ULA's big seafaring boat that transports its rocket stages. In fact, Rocket Ship was just here. Oh, hang on, we've got they're talking over the launch net. Hang on one second, let me listen to that so I can report out to you what's happening. Okay, so it sounds like they're just continuing to keep Atlas healthy and happy, and venting on its... Yeah, so they're just keeping Atlas nice and happy on the launch pad as this extended hold continues. They're not saying anything that's an update or anything at this time. But anyway, what you were looking at, or still are looking at, is Rocket Ship. And Rocket Ship was actually just here at Cape Canaveral, picking up Delta IV rocket stages to take them from Florida to California for a Delta IV mission scheduled from there. I believe they either still are or have just completed the journey through the Panama Canal, and either have begun the upwards journey to Vandenberg Air Force Base, or are still locking their way through the Panama Canal. But that's how ULA transports its rockets around. Yeah, so that's that. And great question too. And sorry I misunderstood you at first there. John Faludi, before I get to your question, John, just a reminder for everyone who's still watching and has been with us, if you've got questions, throw them up in chat. Again, even if you think there are questions that may have already been answered or you're nervous to ask them, please go ahead. We will more than happily answer them for you. And John Faludi wants to know, hydrogen, hydrazine, methane, etc. Why all the different fuels? It's a great question. Different fuels provide different efficiencies for different rocket engines. So basically, when you're designing a rocket, you have to figure out what engine do you want, and what are the performance specifications you're trying to hit with this particular rocket. What do you need your engines to be able to do? And what propellant combinations with liquid oxygen work best. Sometimes those decisions are made for you, like when United Launch Alliance wanted to use the RD-180 for the Atlas V. Well, the RD-180 is a engine that burns RP-1 kerosene and liquid oxygen, so that decision was easy. You have to go with what their engine was already designed to do. You know, when SpaceX was designing the Falcon 9 and they had to figure out what they wanted the Merlin engines to be capable of doing and what they wanted their rocket engines and their rockets to be capable of doing in terms of performance, they landed on RP-1 kerosene and liquid oxygen as well. But then when they went to design Starship, they said, well, wait a minute, RP-1 kerosene doesn't work anymore for what we need it to do or want it to do, so we're going to do methane instead of RP-1. And that's pretty much how you arrive at your at what fuel you use with your oxidizer. And there you have it. You know, for Vulcan, and Vulcan was very much the same. Once they realized they wanted to use the BE-4 engine from Blue Origin, well, those engines are built to use methane and oxygen, so decision made for you. So it just kind of relates to, if you're building it from the ground up, what do you want it to do? And if you're choosing an engine that's already out there on the market, then you're beholden to what that engine burns and how it operates. So that's how they arrive at what fuels and what fuels to use with what with the oxidizer. Monty Arnold wants to know, is there any difference between a geosynchronous insertion orbit versus a high energy geosynchronous orbit? Yes. Okay. So sorry, I had to read that again real quick to make sure I read it right. The glare on my phone is kind of bad. Yes. So there's a huge difference between a geosynchronous insertion orbit, which is what they're flying today, which is it's technically known as a geostationary transfer orbit, where the rocket is not getting the payload entirely to geostationary orbit. There are direct to geostationary or geosynchronous orbit mission profiles that can be flown, but the main difference is that on geostationary transfer orbit, you're getting the apogee, the high point of the orbit, to 37,786 kilometers, which is geostationary orbit. But you're leaving the perigee, the closest point in the orbit to Earth, very close to Earth's surface in relative terms. So geostationary transfer orbits can either be, 35,786 kilometers by 200 kilometers, a very, very elliptical transfer orbit, to what the Atlas V is doing today, which is roughly 35,786 kilometers by 10,500 kilometers, and they are outbriefing on the Anomaly, so hold on one second. I'm going to listen so I know what to update you guys on. Okay, so if I heard them correctly, and Michael, correct me if I misheard any part of this. So basically what they did is they took the affected hydraulic system, they turned it off, and they turned it back on again. And it's working exactly as it should be. And they were asking the launch manager and the launch director for concurrence to go do that again. So to basically turn it off and turn it back on again and make sure that all the readings are showing what they should. But that's what I heard, but it came across a little garbled on my end at one point. And Michael, is that what you heard? Okay, that's exactly what Michael heard. Okay, yeah, so basically they turned it off and they turned it back on again, and it's working. So they're gonna go turn it back off and turn it back on again, see if it's still working, and if it is, we'll have another Anomaly out brief with how they want to proceed. So yes, this is multi-million-dollar rocketry, but the old IT crowd joke of have you tried turning it on and off again? Yep, it's exactly what they did, and it worked. So, you know, sometimes rocket systems are sometimes ground systems, and I'm laughing because it's such a simple fix, but it worked, and I love it. Sometimes rockets, as complicated as they are, and the ground systems as complicated as they are, work exactly like your Apple TV. When it malfunctions, you turn it off, you turn it back on, and it works, and you're good. 202018 02018. So that's 2018 UTC, correct? All right, so 2018 UTC is 1618 EDT, 10 minutes from now. Did I do that right? Yes, so T-minus 10 minutes. So we're 10 minutes away from launch. We're still in our 5 minute and holding. We're still in T-minus 4 minutes and holding. But we are now 10 minutes away from launch. So give me 1 quick minute. There's going to be a little bit of quiet air as I reconfigure my setup for launch. All right, so we are now 7.5 minutes away from liftoff. We are, they have confirmed that all the red line monitoring parameters are up and running, and that everything is as it should be with the Atlas 5 rocket. And we are standing by for another go, no go poll to proceed down into the terminal count and go again. Now, you know what is very, very interesting about this, and I do see another question in the queue to answer before we get into terminal count. But what's very, very interesting about this is at the end of the day, the hydraulic issue that got them, and they are pulling. Everything with the Atlas booster is go. They are now polling all the systems on the Centaur. Everything with Centaur is go, now polling all of the non-rocket related elements, including the range. Everything continues to be go. Still polling. ULA is go. Anomaly chief is go. The range is go. The launch director is go. And the mission director is also go, with final clearance given to proceed to launch. So, if this seems like deja vu to all of you, it is. We're basically right back where we were an hour and a half ago, which is great to be. For those of you who jumped off and are now back in watching it, it was a hydraulic accumulator on the ground side of things that malfunctioned. And believe it or not, ULA fixed the issue by simply turning it off and turning it back on again. And it worked. And I kid you not, that's exactly what they did, and it worked. So sometimes the simplest fix works, and here we are. What we did not hear them say is that they changed anything. So if the issue should occur again, we're likely to get another hold that would kick us out of the terminal count, because they didn't change anything. They turned the system off, they turned it back on, everything came up and was acting the way it should. But we didn't hear them say that they were removing any monitoring lines from the automated systems that would stop the count if the issue reoccurs. So we hope it doesn't reoccur. We hope it was just one of those minor little glitches that gets you, and you turn it off, you turn it on again, and everything's fine and we can go. But, you know, that's where we're at right now. Quick battery check for Mike and DOS. We have 125 minutes of battery life remaining. DOS, I hear you loud and clear. Copy. So again, for those of you who are joining us now for launch, this is one-stop launch shopping. You do not need to go elsewhere. You are going to see live views of the rocket as it lifts off from my camera, and live call-outs from me. But when we lose sight of the Atlas V, and T-minus 4 minutes and counting, we have resumed the count, we are in the terminal count now. But as Atlas climbs out and goes out over the Atlantic and we lose it from my camera here, we will switch seamlessly to the ULA provided live stream. However, the ULA stream that is being fed out to us is about 25 to 30 seconds behind real time. That's on ULA's side, not on our side. So what you'll hear after we make that switch is I'll continue to call out the milestones as they are occurring. And I'll remind you that you'll see that milestone about 30 seconds later on your screen from the various rocket cams. But anyway, we are all set to go here. So we are all set to go here about 3 minutes away now from our anticipated liftoff of the Atlas V rocket. Again, if this is the 138th flight of United Launch Alliance, it is the 83rd flight of the Atlas V rocket, and it is the Atlas booster number 86 that is flying this particular mission. The payload is the Advanced Extremely High Frequency 6 satellite for the US military. It is the 6th of 6 satellites for this particular geostationary communications constellation. The flight termination system has gone to internal power at this point, and everything continues to proceed nominally for a liftoff today. All right. So from wherever you are watching around the world, we hope you enjoy the launch of the Atlas V rocket. We are now 1 minute 55 seconds and counting to liftoff. Atlas has transitioned to internal power at this time. And again, you are looking live at Space Launch Complex 41. All fuel lines into the Centaur are now being purged with gaseous nitrogen to inert them in preparation for liftoff. All fuel flow to the vehicle has been stopped at this time. The flight termination system is now armed, and the Atlas V booster is pressurizing for liftoff. 1 minute, 20 seconds and counting. One minute and counting. Range is green. Clearance to proceed, 50 seconds and counting. At this point, we have passed the point in our previous attempt to launch where we were kicked out. 40 seconds and counting. "28 seconds and counting. 25. Atlas, Centaur, and the payload are all confirmed go for launch. 15 seconds and counting. Here we go into the business end of our count. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. We have ignition. I was a little bit off of the count. Liftoff. Here she goes. Atlas is pitching down range. SRB chamber pressures are nominal. Nominal thrust from the RD-180 engine. The RD-180 has throttled down to 67% thrust as expected. All is there, and apologies for the car siren and alarm. That was my car. The Atlas V decided to set off the car alarm. RD-180 now. The RD-180 is now throttling back up to 75% thrust. We're standing by now for solid rocket booster. SRB burnout confirmed. RD-180 being throttled back to full thrust, standing by for solid rocket separation. Alright. I lost it, guys.
Got it.
Alright, we have jettison of all 5 solid rocket boosters confirmed.
Loop guidance. We are now 2 minutes. We are now 2 minutes into flight, and just a reminder, there is a delay on ULA's side, so you are hearing the call-outs that I am giving as they are actually happening live, but you'll see the events about 30 seconds after they actually happen. All right, you guys are seeing SRB SEP right now. They are continuing to call out. 2.5 minutes now into flight, about 2 minutes left until booster engine cutoff. That was an absolutely gorgeous launch of the Atlas V rocket here. So the Atlas V booster RD-180 engine is now throttling back to maintain just 2.5 Gs of acceleration, which is what this satellite was built to withstand. We've completely lost the view of it. We've completely lost track of it and sight of it here into the bright daylight sky, but it was absolutely gorgeous when we did have it. We have a good view of the contrail that continues to hang over the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station right now on our live stream here, including a little and we have payload fairing jettison confirmed. Just remember, you will see this in about 25 seconds, but we're 1 minute away from booster engine cutoff, but we have confirmation of payload fairing separation. The RD-180 is currently thrusting at 95% of rated performance. And at this point, we're about 40 seconds away from the cutoff of the Atlas V booster, and hey Michael, I'm back. Can you loop the audio in again if it cut off there? I don't know what happened. Oh, there we go. Booster engine cutoff is confirmed. Again, you will see this in about 30 seconds, but we have had booster, and we have good separation of the Atlas booster and the Centaur upper stage. The engine on the Centaur is in pre-start. And we have ignition on the RL-10 on the upper stage of the Centaur. All right, again, you'll see all of this in a few seconds, but we do have a good ignition on the Centaur upper stage. Good trajectory, good tracking, and good performance on that Centaur upper stage right now. Again, you'll see all of this happening. You're seeing it all happening now, but it did happen about 30 seconds earlier. Again, that is the delay on the ULA feed sign. So you guys are now seeing the separation. We have good indications that the thrusters on the Centaur upper stage are firing to maintain good body rotation rates and attitude rates as it does this very long burn now. It'll be 11.5 minutes after liftoff when this first burn will be completed, and Centaur and its AEHF-6 payload will be in a parking orbit. Okay, perfect. And we'll be able to stay through that, which is good, so we don't have to pack up and rush off base right this second. Good response from the engine, and Centaur body rates continue to be reported here by the launch officer. Again, so far a picture-perfect liftoff of the Atlas V rocket. Thank you so much to Username for the super chat. We really appreciate it as well. And we have a report, a post-booster flight report, that the Atlas booster actually performed better than expected. Always good to hear. They sounded a little surprised about that over the net. Normally it's right within predictions, but it was a little better than they expected today for some reason. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more on that later, but always better to be over than under your performance expectations. And right now, the Centaur, and right now the Centaur upper stage is actually reconfiguring itself to begin talking with the tracking and data satellite relay network up in space instead of communicating with ground stations. So it's undergoing that transition right now as well. Oh, perfect. And here we are now back live at Cape Canaveral, where you are looking at the contrail cloud that has expanded away from Launch Complex 41 here at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. The Atlas, let me go ahead and pan up too. The Atlas did an absolutely kick-butt amazing job today. And you can see the contrail way up there in the sky as well from those solid rocket boosters. But let's come back down to the ground, because you can see the launch pad right here. There's our launch pad. It used to have a rocket. It doesn't anymore, and that's what we like to see. A nice, happy, empty launch pad as the rocket continues to do its job. Again, the Centaur upper stage continuing to thrust its engine. About 3 minutes left in this burn, more or less. We have had so far a picture-perfect liftoff from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station at 16:18 Eastern Time, or 20:18 UTC, about an hour and a half later than initially anticipated because a hydraulic issue kicked ULA out of the terminal count with just 46 seconds to go when they were aiming for the exact top of the window. But a gorgeous launch of the Atlas V through the skies of Florida here today. What you're seeing at the launch pad is some venting of the ground systems. There's about 2.5 minutes now of powered flight remaining for the Centaur upper stage before it is in its initial parking orbit. Once it reaches its initial parking orbit, and we have good confirmation of that, that's when we are going to step off of our live stream here, because it is a 5.5-hour long mission to spacecraft separation. A very long mission for the Atlas, so we will step off after we have good confirmation that they are in their parking orbit, which is basically what we really want to hear. Yeah, and when I leave here, we're going to kick it back over to Das and Michael behind the scenes again. Major thanks to Das, our studio host, and Michael, our studio producer today. We can't do these live streams without them. Thank you very much for that. And thank you all of you for your participation and your support. We have about 1.5 minutes now remaining until the first main engine cutoff of the RL-10 of the Atlas V rocket's Centaur upper stage. Again, that's a single engine Centaur. And again, just to remind you, you're going to hear me do the call out of engine shutdown and all the calls thereafter, but you'll see it about 30 seconds after real time. And that's just because of the delay in the ULA live stream itself. It's not a delay on our end, it's just a delay on what ULA is feeding us. But I've got the live countdown loop in my ear to provide to you. But again, we are just standing by now, waiting for Centaur to finish the first part of its job. And that'll happen about 1 minute from now, and it'll be in its initial parking orbit. So its initial parking orbit today will be about between 250 and 300 kilometers in altitude above Earth sea level. The final orbital target it will hit today is 35,786 kilometers by 10,500 kilometers. So a lot of work left to do after it gets into its parking orbit. But parking orbit is what we want, and we should have that coming up in less than 30 seconds. But again, absolutely gorgeous. I hope all of you got a chance to feel a little bit like you were here today, experiencing it. I hope the sound came across for you on the live stream just well, because the sound was incredible as those 5 solid rockets and the Atlas just tore out of here. Okay. Engine cutoff pressure signatures look good. So we have confirmation of a good engine shutdown of the Centaur. Centaur is orbital in its parking orbit, which is exactly what we want to hear. And the RCS, the reaction control system, is doing its job to reorient the stage. So that is a successful first part of the launch sequence today, the first 11 minutes under its belt in this launch campaign sequence for the 83rd flight of the Atlas V rocket, and about 11-minute coast before the next reignition of the Atlas here. So just to go over, we're going to put up the mission event timeline again for you here. Just to go over, so we have successfully made it to orbit and the MECO 1, so number 7 on the launch event list. So we are in our parking orbit, which is exactly where we want to be. We'll coast for about 11 minutes before the Centaur engine reignites for a roughly 6-minute burn. Then we'll go into a really prolonged coast phase before the third burn of the Centaur begins 5 hours, 36 minutes, and 39 seconds after liftoff. So again, for the rest of this launch campaign, we'll be following along with United Launch Alliance. and we have confirmation of an as-expected orbit insertion. So Centaur is exactly where it expected itself to be, based on the pre-flight predicted and actual orbital parameters. So perfect job from the Atlas V booster and the Centaur upper stage today. But that's going to do it from me here from Cape Canaveral. I'm going to switch it back over to DOS. To everyone who watched from around the world, thank you so much. I hope we were able to bring you an exciting launch. I hope we were able to answer all of the questions that you had. Sergasi, thank you so much for the super chat. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all of you from watching from around the world. Hopefully everyone is staying safe. You're staying inside, unless you're essential work personnel. But we hope this provided a good uplifting moment for you this evening. If you or today, this afternoon, this evening, this night, this morning, wherever you are, whatever your time zone is around the world, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and activate notifications. We promise we do not spam you with anything other than cool rocket related videos like what we just brought you today. We are also working on a weekly live show to bring you. We hope to start that on Saturday. We also hope to start here either tomorrow or Saturday as well, a daily 5 to 10 minute what's happening in Boca Chica YouTube show, where we'll sit down with Mary out in Boca Chica and talk with her about how SpaceX is continuing to proceed with their build operations of Starship out there. So we have a lot of stuff that we plan to start up during this coronavirus quarantine period with you. But thank you so much for joining. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Activate those notifications so you know when we go live or we publish a new video. Head on over to NASASpaceflight.com, read this mission's launch article and read all about this mission. And thank you all for being a wonderful community, as you already are. Thank you so much. It means a lot to all of us at NSF to have our community as wonderful as it is. So thank you so much. That's going to do it for me personally from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. DOS, I'm going to throw it back over to you now in the studio.
All right.
Let me know when I am clear.
Let's try to see if we have audio correct, and we do have audio correct. That's good. All right, so back from the studio here, I am DOS. Chris G, you are clear now. I can take it from here. You can go ahead and pack up the gear and get on off the causeway. Again, massive thanks to Chris Gebhardt out there with the camera setup, bringing us the remote feed there. Of course, we've got Chris's camera of the launch, and then when Chris didn't have visual on the rocket anymore, we switched over to the official United Launch Alliance video there, was what you were seeing here in the background. So we could do some replays and stuff, but that was a fantastic launch. Again, had a little bit of a delay there. We got down to T-minus 40-something seconds, and a hold was called, and the hold caused us to end up here almost at the end of the window. The good news is Atlas 5, 551, 5 SRBs on there. Very capable rocket, able to have a guidance system that can change its trajectory based on when it's launching. A lot of extra capability in there for the window that it's going for, the orbit that it was sending, AEHF-6, and it gave them a 2-hour launch window. So even though they had a little bit of an issue with the problem there, I can't actually do that. Yeah, I can't do that. Chris, we need you to clear your mic if you could. If Chris could clear your mic, go ahead and turn your mic off for me. I know it's doubling up the audio there, and I don't have control of it from here. But again, we had 2 hours in the launch window there. They were able to work that issue, what was going on with the ground equipment, something with the hydraulics, and like Chris said, literally restarted it. Right, literally just restarted the stuff, turn it off, turn it on again, and observed it, said, okay, that looks like it's something that we're comfortable doing, and they went ahead and did the launch. And I've got the replay here. We can actually watch the replay right quick. This is from the actual stream. Let's pop over here and see. There we go. Let's pop over here. This is a replay. This happened a little bit earlier. The launch of AEHF-6. That Atlas 551, you see the ignition, you see the water deluge system going, the smoke coming out the side there. A lot of that's from the SRB, a lot of that's from vaporizing water, and that thing gets out of Dodge. When this rocket takes off, when an Atlas 551 goes, if you ever get the opportunity to watch an Atlas 551 launch, you should really try to make it down there. Clearly, very difficult for us to do right now. I completely understand a lot of times, not a lot of times, people live overseas and stuff like that, but it is a fantastic rocket to watch fly. Those 5 SRBs get it off the pad like crazy, and it also leaves this sort of big plume of smoke. It's a spectacle to sort of see these SRBs creating this plume of smoke going into the sky. But you can see right there. We'll watch this all the way up through spacecraft SEP. Spacecraft SEP's like 5 hours from now, so we're not going to watch through spacecraft SEP. I mean, unless y'all want to. But anyways, we'll watch through the booster SEP here. We get the fairings as well. You got 3 of those boosters on one side, 2 of the boosters on the other. Remember, the boosters can be asymmetrical. I don't know if you've ever played Kerbal. I've played a little bit of Kerbal, but they have 3 on one side and 2 on the other. If you tried that in Kerbal, your rocket would be sort of weird. It would be unbalanced because it would have more thrust on one side. But the boosters on the Atlas V actually have a little bit of a cant to their nozzle. All that means is that the nozzle is angled a little bit, and it helps the nozzle actually point through the rocket's center of mass instead of pointing straight up the sides. It's something we can simulate in Kerbal Space Program. A little bit tricky to do, but Atlas V with the 5 SRBs on the side of it flies just fine. And we can see the exhaust. I always like to point this out. You see the exhaust sort of expanding out here. It's because there's lower air pressure. The rocket is going up. There's one SRB. There's another SRB. And you know the ones on the other side are going as well. But you can really see, wow, the tumble on those SRBs. You can really see that rocket exhaust spreading out there because there's not a lot of atmospheric pressure to hold it into a pencil-thin sort of flame like you would normally think, like a little rock. I mean, I guess I could do this, couldn't I? You think of a rocket and imagine, if you will, that this is a rocket engine and it's got a rocket on top of it, right? Imagine that you have this fire coming out of the back. And the trick is, a lot of the times when you see the fire, it ends up looking a little bit like this. So the nozzle is a physical structure that helps hold the exhaust together to make the exhaust sort of go in the direction you want it to. But there's no nozzle out here, but there's atmosphere. There's air, right? All around. I'm drawing air. These are air. The atmospheric pressure actually helps push that rocket into a little thin flame, and that's the typical like flame you think of coming out of the back of the rocket. But as you get higher in the atmosphere, there's less and less air, right? There's less and less air density, less and less air pressure, and there's not any pressure to help hold that into that pencil thin exhaust flame. So once you get up high, you start to see that exhaust spread out. Of course, the nozzle being a physical structure still constrains it, but once you get up into a near vacuum in space, the exhaust right past the nozzle is almost going straight out to the sides like that. So it's something that I like to show. It's one of the things that I really like to see, and you can see it if you're at the Cape watching a rocket take off. You can see the rocket flying through thinner and thinner atmosphere as the exhaust nozzle sort of expands out. That is, oh, well, there was the fairing. Let me roll that back and look at the fairing again right quick. Let's see here. Yeah, let's roll that back and get the fairing. So pause it, bring it back. Where's the fairing? All right, watch this. The fairing's really cool as well. It's got 2 pieces and it sort of opens up like a clamshell. And you can see it boing wobble. Let's see, there it went. Some ice broke off, and look at it. You can actually see it sort of flapping a little bit. The other thing, I got a great question on this. If we watch it in slow motion right here, let's go over here and set this down to playback speed less, right? Watch what happens when the fairing goes past the engine. Remember what I was just explaining about the exhaust gases expanding straight out because there's no air pressure? You can see the exhaust gases passing the fairing passing the exhaust gases. And this interaction right here is actually engine exhaust hitting the fairing. That's why that lights up like that, because there's not a lot of atmospheric pressure. And literally what you see on the screen right now is a rocket engine, right? And I'm going to draw this from the side. It's a rocket engine like that, and there is a exhaust that's coming out of it, but there's not very much air pressure, so it's not a pencil-thin flame, right? It is a very widespread exhaust. And when that fairing gets right here, the exhaust is actually hitting the fairing. And so you can see right there, that is the exhaust coming out of the engine, hitting that fairing, sort of lighting it up, and you can see some sort of exhaust effects there. So we'll keep going. Let's send it back to regular speed, like that. Click play. And then it sort of aerodynamically flops away. Again, those fairings, nobody's trying to catch them. Those are going down and burning up. There's actually a stiffening ring So the second thing we saw there, right? There's a fairing. Well, come on. Don't do this to me. There you go. That right there is actually part of what helps carry the load from the main booster up past the Centaur, right? So that is an internal part of the fairing that's sort of on the outside of the Centaur and helps carry that load up, right? So that continues to fly by. This over here is good. I don't know if there's any other questions. Just scrolling through chat. I think we're fine, yeah. I'm on the most recent YouTube questions, I think. Sorry, repeat that for me? So back in the studio, Michael Baylor is reporting that the second burn of the Centaur upper stage is now underway. That has just started. We're doing replays. We're rolling back the tape and doing some little BAM telestration sort of things drawn on it, but the mission is continuing on. Remember, that spacecraft separation is not going to happen for almost 5 hours, if I'm not mistaken, but they are underway in the second burn right now. So let me pop back over to this way. And just to make sure everything's good. I guess I'm super low to the ground. I'm like a little talking head that has the lower third right under me. I probably need to account for that whenever I go through. But any other questions? Now is a good time for final questions. What is the payload? John Ecott, this was a military satellite. It was AEHF-6, and that is a communications satellite that's shared by the military. There you saw the booster separation. This is from the official United Launch Alliance illustration, their CGI showing what was going on because they don't have the cameras that can track it this far out, right? I'll scroll through. Do the RD-180 nozzles gimbal separately or as a unit? That is a good question. George Jetson, you're asking me, are the RD-180 nozzles, which the RD-180 has 2 nozzles on the bottom of it like that, and then there's structure up here like this, and then you have the actual rocket, right? You're asking me, do they gimbal together, or can they gimbal separately? Like, can one vector in that direction, and can one vector in that direction? I don't know the answer to that. Does anybody know the answer to that? Can anybody back at the studio Google that? I know some of the, and I'm thinking about Kerbal here, some of the engines will have independent vectoring, and then some of them are all on one big frame. And so even though there's multiple nozzles or chambers, it doesn't gimbal independently. I'm actually seeing if anybody says that with my art. Yes, my art. I know. What? I'm drawing good art. I'm just trying to... Whoa, sorry, I just draw a mustache on this guy. I don't think United Launch Alliance would appreciate that. Some people believe it's separate for roll purposes. Still sort of trying to verify this. Again, I am the person who wants to verify before I answer something. They are separate? Michael? Okay, on the RD-181s, they are separate, is what I just got back from the studio there. Again, if I don't know the answer off the top of my head, I don't want to be like, well, actually, yes, they do, and tell you something wrong. I don't feel bad asking, like phoning a friend here and just confirming the answer. And I've got multiple confirmations from the studio. Yes, they can gimbal independently from one another. So that is a good question there. I didn't know off the top of my head that one, but I always want to make sure I provide good information. I see way too many people that just because they can get a live stream going, they say whatever, and it's not always completely accurate, right? Let me scroll back up, see if I got anything else. Let's see here. There's moisture, the future, launching rockets. Linear exhaust can't be made efficient for flight. Ryan Jack said it's a shame the exhaust can't be made more efficient for flight. This is why you will see different engine designs for different atmospheric densities. Honestly, the RD-180 is an engine that's used for liftoff. The RL-10 is an engine that's engineered. The engine bell specifically is engineered to be super efficient up in thin atmosphere. And sometimes you can see the difference in the size of the engine bell. So if you have something that has sort of a smaller bell, that might be something for sea level where you still have part of your engine bell is the atmosphere, right? That helps you get all the energy out of that exhaust. And I know I'm drawing on the little screen here. And then if you have something that has a really big bell, the RD-180, the RL-10 has a big bell. On the Delta 4s, the RL-10 actually has an extendable bell that becomes even bigger, and it slides out to make a bigger engine bell. Another great example is the Wolfhound engine. It's not called the Wolfhound engine. On the Apollo, the CSM, the main engine on the CSM was just this massive bell with this teeny tiny little throat. And that's because that was 100% designed to operate in a vacuum. You want more of this physical structure to help keep your exhaust going in the direction you want it to go, right? You want it to go backwards so that Newton pushes your rocket forwards, right? So that is a great question, and it is something that they absolutely do to keep those things more efficient based on where you're going to use the engine. I'm going to keep scrolling through chat and see what it is. It's already launched, Goal Vibes. The mission has already launched, and we just... Sounds like we just had a main engine cutoff over the CompNet, and they're waiting for that secondary payload release. So that second burn has completed successfully. Scott Van Arnam, they do not retrieve these SRBs. These SRBs go down and end up in the ocean for the Atlas V. People asking about how much horsepower does the rocket have. The rocket doesn't have horsepower. It's not a useful measure to figure out how many horses per second, whatever horsepower works out to be. You might be able to try and calculate it, but it's not the important thing. The pounds of thrust and then the efficiency of that thrust are the important thing. So you'll get sort of like how many pounds or how many kilograms of thrust you get, newtons of thrust you get, and how efficiently can you make that thrust comes down to a number called ISP, which is specific impulse. And it's not really miles to the gallon. It's sort of a rough analogy to say that the ISP, the specific impulse of a rocket engine, maps to the miles per gallon of your car. Not really. The specific impulse just talks about how much bang you get for how much bounce you get for the ounce. Realistically, it's bounce to the ounce, because it just says how much energy you get out of each unit of fuel that you blow up and throw out the back of your rocket. But we don't really look at horsepower or torque or anything like that for the engine thrust. We certainly deal with torque when we talk about aerodynamics and stability. We were talking about the RD-181's gimbaling down here, or sorry, the RD-180's gimbaling. And when these gimbal, you have the center of mass of the rocket that's up here. You have a force that's being applied at a slight angle, right? And so you get a lever arm, and then a torque would be applied to that. But in terms of horsepower isn't a particularly useful number for us to use on a rocket. I'm going to keep scrolling down. I mean, I don't mind answering the end of the questions. I'm no Chris G, but I really don't mind continuing answering some questions. You missed the launch. Well, you can always see the launch here back on our channel. So you can scroll back on this channel and watch the launch, or we'll have the video ready as soon as it finishes processing when we're done. Let's see here. Why wasn't there a second stage onboard camera? Falafel, I'm not United Launch Alliance. They just have a gift shop, and I bought this online, right? So I don't work for United Launch Alliance. It probably comes down to the customer. And if the camera wouldn't be critical to the mission, and the camera is not something that the customer needs to pay, and the important thing here is a live camera feed, right? So a live camera feed that you can see on a live stream versus an engineering camera that United Launch Alliance is still getting. It's just not being shown on the feed, right? So I would say that it probably comes down to the mission and the customer as to whether or not they attempt to get a feed from that, from other stages of the rocket. They're not trying to get likes on Instagram or anything like that. They're trying to put a military communications satellite in a very specific orbit to a very, very high degree of accuracy so that the satellite can use its fuel to prolong its mission, be on station even longer. So in terms of they didn't have a camera up there, wow, that's lame. Their number one mission is putting that satellite up there for the customer, which was the Space Force in this case, the Air Force. Good question. I'm not scared of questions. Like I'll answer questions like that. Let's keep on keeping on. I'm scrolling down the chat and seeing if I missed anything else. What is the ISP of an RL-10? That's something that I would Google. I would just Google the RL or the ISP of an RL-10. Don't know that one off the top of my head. I could quote you a lot of the ISPs from Engines in Kerbal Space Program, but I can't off the top of my head. Could you repeat that? 449. 449. So back from the studio again, our experts in the background. That was Michael Baylor. Next spaceflight said it was 449 seconds was the specific impulse of the RL-10 on the Centaur upper stage. There you go. See? All I got to do is talk long enough. If I run my mouth for long enough, I can get the right answer in my ear over here. So really well. Let's see. You can see. Oh, wow. Terminator, you're saying you can see it flying over Wales, UK? You should try to get a picture of that if you could. That's cool. Was it on a trajectory that was flying over Wales? You know about ISP, but what is the ISP? The ISP is the number of seconds that a rocket can, I guess, basically hover based on the unit of fuel, on one unit of fuel. It's the number of seconds that you can use a unit of fuel to produce a specific amount of thrust. And the more seconds you can produce that thrust for, the more efficiently you're using that unit of fuel. And the less seconds you can produce that thrust for, the less efficiently you're using that unit of fuel. Does that make sense? I know it's sort of weird to describe, but specific impulse is measured in seconds, and it's literally talking about the amount of seconds that you can generate thrust per unit of fuel, right? So imagine that you had an engine. These are my engines. They're very Kerbal engines, right? This is an engine, and it has, say, 1 unit of fuel in it. And I'm just going to make up units here, just 1 unit of fuel. And if you use that fuel, you blow it up and you throw it out the back, right? How many seconds can you produce X amount of thrust? If you can only produce it for 200 seconds, because your engine is a Lamo 3000 or whatever the name of the engine is, if you have another engine that is actually, look, I'm going to draw it with a bigger engine bell too. If you have another engine that's efficient like the RL-10, and it has the same 1 unit of fuel, and it's creating, well, RL-10 is optimized for vacuum, so let's go ahead and put the thrust coming out of the side like that. The RL-10 could use that same unit of fuel and produce that amount of thrust for 449. So that's why higher specific impulses are better. The higher the specific impulse, the more seconds it can use that unit of fuel to create that amount of thrust. Does that sort of clear it up for you? I like my drawings. Let's see here. I'm scrolling down because again, I'm not looking at these in real time. I'm just scrolling through and seeing if I missed anything. Do we know the actual frequency of the satellite? Kevin Caldwell, if you're trying to pull like a war games and log into the military satellite, I don't know the frequency of the satellite. I'm not sure that that's something that you would be able to Google either. I'm just going to toss that out there. If that's what you were asking. If you mean frequency like the orbital period of the satellite, that might be something that we could look up. But if you're trying to, like type a lot and then say I'm in, that is not something. Even if I knew that I would tell you on a live stream. I'm just saying. I'm still scrolling down. What's my name? I'm Das. So when it says studio host John Das Galloway, that's me. I do Twitch streaming usually, but I'm here helping out NASASpaceflight doing the studio hosting. So when we're doing scene changes, getting remote camera set up and that sort of stuff, that is me here from the NASA Spaceflight studio, live from Charlotte, North Carolina, which is not really a hotbed for spaceflight activity, but I'm here. Let me keep on scrolling down. The nozzle extension, Scott! Dude! What's up, Scott? When did you sneak through here? You actually answered in chat. I wasn't looking in chat. You said RL-10 gets up to 465 seconds of specific impulse. Good. I should have Skyped Scott, and he could have done the specific impulse explanation a lot better than I could have. Dude, how are you doing? Thanks for stopping in and saying hi in chat. And there, Delta 4 second stage has a nozzle extension that gives it better performance. It like goes, bzzz, and it literally extends the nozzle out to constrain the exhaust and get a little bit more bang for the buck. Wow, you have clear skies in Scotland. Nice. I wish there was some way that I could highlight Scott's information over here, because on Twitch I can set Scott as a VIP, and anytime Scott talks in my Twitch stream, it says that he's highlighted, so I don't miss that stuff. You're chatting from work right now, still writing code from work. No kidding. And he also said the orbital period will be 23 hours and 56 minutes. There you go. All right, finally, there we got that. How did you get your face and body cut out at the bottom of the screen? It was a streaming accident. It was an industrial streaming accident. And just like right here, there was a camera angle at one point, and it just like literally from the armpits down, I'm just not, I exist below what you see on the camera. I'm just going to toss that out there for you. It's a camera angle and it's camera cropping. Cool. Scrolling down. I'm scrolling down. Let's see. Again, I'm not reading questions out of a queue or anything. I'm just grabbing them myself. Let's see here. Was fun at Wallops. Hey, Joseph, how are you doing? Stay healthy and safe. I am sheltering in place. We've got food and stuff like that. Critical outings only and stuff. But give him a blue wrench, right? Put him on the hook to moderate. I don't think that I would wish that upon Mr. Manley. I don't think that I would wish moderating live YouTube chat on Scott. Ay, ay, ay. So, am I missing anything else? If there's not anything else that would need my skills of a telestrator, it's a program called Epic Pen, and it is a Cintiq drawing tablet that I use to sort of annotate things on the screen. I've been using this for my Kerbal Space Academy boot camps and my Kerbal Space Academy how-to lessons. I do live streams where sort of I watched a lot of Scott Manley. And then I was like, I think I could do that. And I do live streams on Twitch where we teach people how to play Kerbal Space Program live so you can answer questions. The last couple days, with everybody being sort of back at home, I've been doing what I call Kerbal Help Desk every day. So whatever your skill level, wherever you are in Kerbal Space Program, even if your question is, what the heck's a Kerbal, you can stop by my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/DasValdez. And every day I've been doing these live Kerbal help desks, helping people learn some Kerbal. But honestly, you're not going to go wrong if you see all of Scott's videos. You know, Scott, what do I like to say? I say, Scott has forgotten more about rockets than I'll ever know. And that is definitely true. I just happen to have more free time than he does. So I can sit here and draw rocket pictures on a live stream. So this is my real job. This is what I do for a living. Centaur's flying safe. Nice. Centaur's flying safe. See if I mean anything else. Please say your name on the screen and clap. Are we at the circus or are we in a live stream? I'm not quite, I'd be happy to answer a rocket or spaceflight related question for you, but in terms of like trying to say Evan and like clapping or something, I'm not going to do that. Really? What is this? Seriously? Hey, Pops Randall's Das, great job today. Where's your studio? I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, Pops. I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I travel around. I have live stream kits that I take around, and I stream from museums. We stream from rocket launches. The kit that Chris is using is something that I sort of put together, and they used to borrow one of mine, and then we got them a shopping list, and they bought their own kit. We're using LiveView Solos. So this right here is a LiveView Solo. And LiveView is fantastic. This is news equipment, so you'll see this on like a news van. This is the same sort of stuff that a news broadcast would use for like a remote from the side of the road or whatever. And Chris actually had one of these units at the Cape. These are modems. They're 4G modems, basically USB sticks. And we also had a couple, I don't have one within reach, but we had some hotspots as well. And the unit that Chris was using, a LiveView Solo, can combine 4 different internet connections together, and it literally takes an HDMI input. You see the HDMI input over there? So this is how Chris is able to bring you our live camera from Cape Canaveral. Today he was on 3 internet connections, and I was here in the studio monitoring his internet connections, and I can tell you, oh, AT&T is dropping, the AT&T network is saturating. The unit will automatically spool up the Verizon modems if AT&T can't handle it. But massive thanks to LiveView for helping us out with these broadcasts, and they actually do sponsor some of the stuff that I do. So this is the magic behind getting those remote cameras from out in the field. Keep on rolling through. You make great use of your free time. Nice. Thanks, Scott. I make great use of my free time. I just talk a lot. Dude, Scott, I don't know if you were here for my cosplay earlier. I did a little bit of Tori Bruno cosplay, and I got my hat, and then I also had my my book here. And so for a little while I wasn't busy, I was sitting back reading about the Taming Liquid Hydrogen, the Centaur upper stage rocket from 1958 to 2002. It's not a hard hat or anything. It's not rated to walk around a Launchpad with. I just happen to have one of those sitting around the office here. I'm jealous you have a physical copy. They were reprinting it on Amazon, and I literally saw it on Amazon, and it was like a next day printing sort of thing. The production date in the back of the book says that it was... Look, I mean, I thought this was cool. I don't know if you can see that. Made in USA, Columbia, South Carolina, 7th March. So I ordered it on like the 5th or 6th, and they printed it down the road for me, and they shipped it to me. And I've been sort of slowly but surely working my way through it. I wanted to learn about liquid hydrogen as a fuel and welding stainless steel. So, yes. Yes. When will the stream end? Pretty soon. Pretty soon. I'm about to shut it down. If there's not any more questions that I'm seeing, I think that we are rapidly approaching, and I have a lot of monitors around me right now. I wish I could pick up the camera and show you the rest of the room, but when I read chat, I turn this way. When I do production scene chases and stuff like that, I turn this way. When I do telestration, I turn this way. When I do studio stuff, I turn this way. When I need to communicate with the other NASA spaceflight people, I turn to the laptop all the way over here. I've got 5 screens around me right now running 4 different live streams on 6 different internet connections that result in 2 different... I had a graphic that I was bringing up earlier. I don't think I have the graphic up anymore. But anyways, y'all. Oh, yeah. Oh, here's my graphic. Look. Oh, no, that's a Kerbal craft. That's not the graphic. Anyways, there's a graphic somewhere around here. There it is. This was the magic that makes all of these live streams happen. Remote cameras in the field. Chris G with NASA Spaceflight was up here. He was working through a solo. It was going to light stream on the NASA Spaceflight live stream. This is my studio. I have a camera. I have 2 cameras pointed at me right now for 2 different streams. I'm using Open Broadcaster software and a solo and live stream. Anyways, I was explaining to my stream on Twitch, because I'm live in both places right now. I was explaining the behind the scenes of what I do to make these broadcasts possible. So if you're interested in learning about streaming or whatever, my Twitch channel, I try to do these how-tos on how all of this is actually working. Always happy to answer questions, but I believe, yeah, I need a mirror, like a big mirror to hold up and point at stuff so you can see the other monitors. Actually, I can't do that because one of these, I actually call it the sanitary monitor, like the safe monitor. And if someone were to put a link in chat, I can bring up that link in a way that I wouldn't show it on the stream. And just make sure you're never going to give me up or whatever, right? And then if I know that this link is okay, then I could bring it over and actually display it to the rest of the stream. So what was your signal strength at Wallops? So it's a little bit harder when I'm actually in the field to watch the signal strength, but our upload was fine at Wallops. We didn't have any trouble doing 6 bits up. I mean, the other thing, I can show this real quick. I don't know if y'all find this interesting or not, but I was managing Chris's modems. So I've taken a screenshot from somewhere else, and while Chris Gebhardt is in the field, I'm actually logged into his solo, right? So he has one of these attached to the tripod running his camera, and I can log into this device and I can watch it in real time from the studio here, just via a web browser. And so I can see that when he's out there, I had him hooked up to 3 different modems, and there were 2 AT&T modems and 1 Verizon modem. And so at this snapshot that I took, the AT&T modem was at full strength, and the Verizon modem was at full strength, and the other AT&T modem was at full strength. So we were getting a total of 5,372 kilobits up, and that varies a little bit, but all of his modems were healthy. And we watched these over the course of the launch, like when we did Starliner, the Verizon network was completely down. And I could see in the interface, we were not getting any bandwidth from Verizon. It was this one. I was not getting any bandwidth from Verizon, and we were hanging on a single AT&T modem for the live stream that Chris did for that. So I'm sort of standing back, and if his camera drops, we can switch to the official feed. We can bring in audio. I can come in and I can start doing commentary if the camera that we have in the field completely drops or whatever. But that's my specialty, right? I play a lot of Kerbal, but I also love live streaming stuff, and this is what I'm doing. Can you hear me now? Nope. I only need about 100, 150 kilobits up to get good audio from Chris in the field. So he could have like a really bad video signal that's all pixelated and stuff, but I still get good audio as long as he's got 100, 120, 150, and I can put his audio over the official stream like we did earlier. So it's like, I'm the backup, the anchor over here, I guess. I've actually got a Blackmagic ATEM Mini. We use a Blackmagic ATEM Mini for our in-person museum events. So we did, on the NASA Spaceflight channel, an interview with Allison Bullinger, who's a flight director for NASA. We were sitting at the Intrepid Museum a couple weeks ago, actually. And it was Kids Week, and Allison did a presentation up on the stage, and then sat down and did a NASA Spaceflight Q&A with me and my buddy EJ over on Twitch. and we were using an A10 Mini to switch cameras and stuff there. So we have one of those that we use for specific things. Here in the studio with all the capture cards and multiple computers, I've got 2 computers here that I'm using. I don't need the A10 Mini for what I'm doing here because I've got capture cards and I use the computer to actually do the switching. But anyways, folks, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down here now. In terms of the NASA Spaceflight live stream, I appreciate everybody coming out today. Again, I know the world is a crazy place these days, and I appreciate that we were able to share the launch with you and not just give you video, but give you a community you can hang out with. It's really cool to see people asking questions. Chris G knows so much about so many spaceflight-related things, and it's just great to see people sort of asking the questions, Chris G answering them in real time, and people talking around each other and stuff like that. I don't even like the term social distancing. We may be physically distance, but we are socially integrated. We are socially all together when we come together to watch things like this. And NASA Spaceflight does rocket launches. I do a lot of Kerbal stuff and live streaming stuff. And by all these powers combined, we are so happy we can bring this and share this stuff with you. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down the NASA Spaceflight stream right now. Probably going to end up doing some Kerbal Help Desk over on my Twitch channel a little bit later. So again, twitch.tv/DasValdez, DasValdez, if you want to ask questions about Kerbal. But this marks the end of the NASA Spaceflight broadcast. So far, it's still going. Remember, it's another 5 hours or so before that payload separates, so we don't call mission success until the spacecraft has successfully separated. But it sounds like everything was ticking along nominally. All the lights were blinking in the way that they were supposed to be blinking. So we will continue to stand by and wait for mission success. Follow us over on Twitter at NASA Spaceflight. Website, nasaspaceflight.com, all of those places you can keep up to date. And in a couple hours here, that we hopefully get confirmation of a successful spacecraft separation for AEHF-6. But for now, Das Valdez signing off, and I will see you nerds later. I'm the guy that actually has to click off the scene. It's just me. So, where's my, there it is. Later, nerds. Okay, that should be going there. Did it? Oh no, it's going to crash. It crashed. Of course it crashed.